Be very still now. Let the room be quiet, and let your body soften wherever it touches the bed or the chair. If there is any strain in your shoulders, allow it to melt. If there is any tightness behind your eyes, let it loosen. You have nothing to solve in this moment. You have nothing to prove. You have nothing to hold together with force. Tonight, you are allowed to rest. I am with you. In the simplest way a voice can be with you. Steady, calm, unhurried. You do not need to do anything as you listen. You do not need to concentrate. You do not need to remember every word. Your only task is to receive as gently as one receives the warmth of a blanket. Let the words pass through you without effort, like a slow stream moving through a quiet meadow. If thoughts come, let them come. If they wander, let them wander. Do not fight them. Do not argue with them. Do not chase them. Simply notice them and let them drift on, like a cloud crossing the face of the moon. The mind grows tired when it wrestles, but the mind grows quiet when it is not opposed. And tonight, we are not opposing anything. We are relaxing into a deeper order. Listen as though you are listening from within, not with the outer ear alone. There is a place in you that hears without strain. There is a still place that understands without effort. Let that place awaken now. Let my words be like a gentle knocking on a door you have always owned. Breathe slowly, not to change anything, only to give yourself permission to stop hurrying. With each exhale, feel the day sliding away from you. Feel the weight of the hours loosening its grip. Let the small concerns that follow you from morning until evening begin to fall from your hands. It is not your work to carry them into the night. You may have come to this moment feeling that you must control life, or life will not be kind to you. You may have come with the feeling that you must think harder, plan better, watch more closely, anticipate every turn, or else something will be lost. I know that feeling well. I have known the weariness of trying to be the guardian of outcomes. But I tell you now, as simply as I can, you were never meant to live that way. The strain of control is not a virtue. It is only a habit, and a habit can be replaced. Tonight is for replacement. Tonight is for release. Tonight is for giving the matter back to its true owner. When I speak of God, I do not speak of a distant being seated somewhere beyond the stars, waiting to be persuaded by your pleading. I speak of the only God you will ever meet directly. The awareness within you that says, I am. The quiet presence that is hearing these words right now. That presence is not separate from you. It is you, beneath the roles, beneath the history, beneath the anxieties and the rehearsed fears. And when you leave something in God's hands, you leave it in the hands of that deeper self, the creative power of imagination. Now, do not rush to make a philosophy of this. Do not try to turn it into a debate. Tonight is not for argument. Tonight is for experience. You will not be asked to take anything on faith without tasting it. You will be led to a feeling, and that feeling will do more for you than any explanation ever could. There is a reason you listen while you sleep. Sleep is not merely rest for the body. Sleep is a doorway for the soul. It is the nightly return to the creative workshop where states are impressed and tomorrow is quietly formed. Most men and women do not know what they are doing when they go to sleep. They lie down with the day still clutched in their mind, and they carry worry into the very place where creation is most receptive. Then they rise and wonder why the same patterns greet them again. But you have come tonight for something else. You have come to be shown how to enter sleep as one who has already received, how to close your eyes, not in escape, but in possession, how to let the body drift while the heart rests in certainty, how to stop bargaining with life and begin living from the end. So let us begin with one gentle understanding. You do not manifest by struggling with the world. You manifest by assuming the state of the wish fulfilled. You do not bring a thing into being by chasing it. You bring it into being by dwelling inwardly in the feeling that it is already yours. This is not a game of pretending. It is the law of consciousness. The outer world is an echo. It is the shadow cast by the inner state you most consistently occupy. And when you change the inner state, the echo must change. It may not change at the exact moment your anxious mind demands, but it must change. The mirror cannot defy the face that stands before it. I remember a time when I lived with the sensation of pressure always near. The day felt like a series of demands, and my mind moved constantly toward how. How will it be done? How will it be arranged? How will it be prevented? How will it be fixed? And the more I lived in that question, the more life presented me with reasons to ask it again. Then one night, I grew tired. Not merely tired in body, but tired in spirit. Tired of trying to do with effort what can only be done by state. And in that weariness, something merciful happened. I stopped negotiating. I stopped rehearsing. I stopped pleading for a different tomorrow. And I entered into a quiet mood, a kind of inner surrender. And I felt, not as a hope, but as a reality, that it was already handled. There is a sweetness to that feeling, a softness. It is not the excitement of a man who believes he has found a clever trick. It is the relief of someone who has finally stopped resisting what is true. It feels like setting down a heavy bag you have carried for miles, and realizing your arms were never meant to hold it forever. When I rose the next day, the world had not visibly changed in that first moment. Yet something had changed that was greater than any visible change I had. And because I had changed, the world had no choice but to follow. The bridge of incidents began to form. People moved, letters arrived, opportunities opened in ways I could not have designed. It was as though life itself had been waiting for me to stop interfering. That is what I want for you tonight. Not a forced optimism, not a frantic hope, not a new form of mental labor disguised as spirituality. I want you to enter the Sabbath, true rest, the rest that comes when you know the creative act is done. Now in the quiet of this hour, I will speak to you as I would speak to a dear friend, sitting beside the fire, listening while the house grows still. I will remind you of what you already are. And as you listen, your mind will begin to loosen its grip on the old story. Your body will begin to accept peace as natural. Your heart will remember what it feels like to trust. For many, the phrase, "leave it in God's hands," has been misunderstood. Some have used it to excuse fear. They say, "I have left it," while inwardly they still clutch it, still measure it, still dread it. Others have used it to justify passivity, to withdraw from life, to wait in weakness. But that is not what I mean. To leave it in God's hands is to stop feeding the condition with your attention. It is to remove the emotional investment from the problem and give that investment to the fulfilled state. It is to refuse to rehearse defeat. It is to stop narrating lack. It is to no longer give the old scene the privilege of your inner speech. You see, your inner speech is your true prayer. It is what you whisper to yourself when you think no one is listening, and someone is always listening. Your own deeper consciousness, the builder within. It takes your inner conversation as instruction. It accepts your habitual feeling as a blueprint. It does not judge you. It does not argue. It simply builds. And because it builds so faithfully, you must be gentle with yourself. Do not condemn yourself for having built what you now wish to change. The very fact that you can observe it means you are no longer entirely trapped in it. You are awake enough to choose again. And choosing again is the miracle. So tonight, you will choose a different inner conversation. You will choose a different feeling. You will choose a different assumption, and you will carry that choice into sleep, where it can be impressed without resistance. If you feel you have been carrying too much, let that be your first admission, quiet and honest. Not a complaint, but an acknowledgement. I have been carrying too much. And then, let your next sentence be the turning point. I lay it down now. Say it inwardly if you like. Not with strain, not with drama, simply as a gentle fact. I lay it down now. And as you say it, feel your hands releasing something. Feel your shoulders lowering. Feel the breath becoming deeper, slower, more natural. You may wonder, what about my responsibilities? My answer is responsibilities are not burdens. When they are carried from peace, they become burdens only when carried from fear. The same outer act can be heavy or light depending upon the state from which it is done. So we do not escape life. We enter life from a higher state, and this is where the secret lies. You do not leave your desire in God's hands by giving up your desire. You leave your desire in God's hands by accepting it as already fulfilled in consciousness. You claim the end inwardly, and then you stop touching it with anxious fingers. You stop checking it. You stop measuring it. You stop asking, is it working? Because asking is confessing that you doubt your own creative act. The moment you truly accept the end, you feel a stillness. That stillness is the sign that the seed has been planted. Not a sign in the outer world, an inner sign. The soft hush that settles in the chest. A quiet certainty. A feeling of, it is done. When you feel that, you are in Sabbath. Now let me give you a simple image. Imagine that you have written a letter and sealed it. Once it is sealed, you do not open it again and again to rewrite it. You do not tear it open to see if the ink is still there. You have written, sealed, and sent. In the same way, you will write your desire upon consciousness tonight. Seal it with feeling and send it into the deep. Then you will rest. This rest is not laziness, it is confidence. It is the calm of someone who knows that the law is faithful. The farmer does not pull at the seed to make it grow. He plants and he trusts. He waters and he waits. And the waiting is not anxious, it is natural. So I ask you now, very gently, what is it you have been trying to control? Do not answer with many words. Do not stir the mind into argument. Simply let it be known within you. Perhaps it is money. Perhaps it is health. Perhaps it is the behavior of another. Perhaps it is your future. Perhaps it is the fear that time is passing and something will not come. Whatever it is, you are going to do something tonight that feels almost too simple. You will place it into the hands of God by entering the state where it is already resolved. How do you do that? Not by forcing an image, not by straining to feel something grand. You do it by finding the natural feeling you would have if it were already done. The relief, the ease, the quiet gratitude, the ordinary peace of a problem that no longer exists. Do you know that feeling? You have felt it before, perhaps after a difficult matter was settled, or after a long worry finally ended. You took a breath and realized, it's over. That breath is the feeling you seek. It is not dramatic. It is gentle. And because it is gentle, it is easy to carry into sleep. So now, let the body relax a little more and imagine only lightly what tomorrow would feel like if the matter were already handled. Not what tomorrow would look like, what it would feel like. How would you lie in bed? How would you breathe? How would your chest feel? What would be absent from your mind? Perhaps you would stop bracing. Perhaps you would stop scanning for trouble. Perhaps you would stop rehearsing worst outcomes. Perhaps you would feel spacious inside, as though a room had been cleared. Let yourself taste that spaciousness now. You are not waiting for permission. You are not waiting for the world to change first. You are choosing the state that will cause the world to change. And here, quietly, is a truth that will set you free if you accept it. You do not surrender to circumstances. You surrender your circumstances to your own consciousness. That is what it means to leave it in God's hands. You return the matter to the only power that can truly shape it. In a moment, I will lead you into the borderland of drowsiness with intention, not to keep you awake, but to escort you gently to sleep. I will show you the simplest way to impress the subconscious. A short scene, a few inward words, and a feeling. Nothing complicated, nothing strenuous. The power is not in complexity. The power is in acceptance. But before we go there, let us correct one more common misunderstanding. Many believe that to leave it in God's hands means to stop desiring. They think desire is a sign of lack, but desire is not your enemy. Desire is the voice of the deeper self, calling you into a new state. Desire is a prophecy. It is not proof that you are missing something. It is proof that something exists for you to claim. The mistake is not desire. The mistake is the anxious relationship to desire. The grasping, the fear, the sense that if it does not come quickly, you will be harmed. That is what must be released. So tonight, we do not crush desire. We fulfill it inwardly. We give it the feeling of completion, and then we let it rest in God's hands, which means we let it rest in the deeper consciousness until it externalizes. If you can do this, you will discover something beautiful. The mind quiets, not because you have forced it quiet, but because it no longer has a crisis to solve. When the state changes, the mind's argument stops, and in that stopping, sleep comes more naturally. Now I will speak to you slowly. Let your eyelids become heavy, if they wish. Let your breath deepen. You may drift in and out of awareness as you listen. That is perfectly fine. The deeper mind is receiving even when the surface mind wanders. In fact, it often receives best when the surface mind is not trying so hard. And if at any point you fall asleep, then let this be the last thought that goes with you, like a soft candle carried into the night. It is handled. It is done. I leave it in God's hands, and I rest. Let those lines be gentle. Do not grip them. Let them float through you like a lullaby. A lullaby is not repeated to force a child to sleep. It is repeated because its rhythm carries the child into rest. So now, as the night holds you, we move from understanding into practice. We move from the strain of how into the calm of already. We move from the old habit of control into the new habit of trust. And I will tell you exactly what to do, so simply that you may smile at its simplicity. First, we will enter the state akin to sleep, that drowsy threshold where the conscious mind relaxes its vigilance. Second, we will select one small imaginal act that implies your desire is already fulfilled. Third, we will feel it as natural for a few moments, and then we will let sleep take us while we remain in that feeling. That is all. Now let us begin. Let your body grow still, not stiff, still. Let your arms rest. Let your hands be quiet. Let your legs settle. Let your breathing find its own slow rhythm. And as you breathe, imagine that each exhale is you releasing the need to control the outcome. If an anxious thought appears, do not argue with it. Just answer it softly, inwardly, like a kind parent soothing a worried child. Answer it with one sentence. It is already taken care of. Say it again, only if it feels comforting. It is already taken care of. And now, choose a simple scene, very short. Something that would be true if your burden were already lifted. Perhaps you are sitting at a table and you feel a quiet peace where worry used to be. Perhaps you hear yourself saying to a friend, "Everything worked out beautifully." Perhaps you receive a simple message or letter that implies resolution. Or perhaps the scene is only this, you lying here tonight, breathing easily, because you know there is nothing to fear. Do not make it elaborate. Do not build a drama. Keep it small, natural, and quiet. Now enter it. Not as one watching a picture, but as one living a moment. Feel the ease of it. Feel the relief. Feel the ordinary calm of a life that is already settled. Let that feeling fill your chest, not as excitement, but as peace. And as you feel it, whisper inwardly, very softly, the sentence that seals the act. I leave everything in God's hands. Say it as though it is already true, because it is. In consciousness, it is already done, the moment you accept it. And now, do nothing more. Do not try to improve the feeling. Do not try to hold it tightly. Just rest in it, like resting in warm water. Let it surround you. Let it be the atmosphere of your mind. If you remain in this mood, sleep will come without struggle. And while you sleep, the deeper self will do what it always does. It will externalize the state you have impressed upon it. You may not see the bridge of incidents forming. You may not understand how it will unfold, but you do not need to. The seed does not understand the tree. It only accepts the soil and the season. So tonight, you are the one who plants. God is the one who grows. Your work is to assume. God's work is to express. And because God is your own consciousness, there is no separation in this partnership. It is one power doing one work through you. Now rest. Let the words become slower in you. Let them become fewer. It is handled. It is done. I leave everything in God's hands, and I rest. Stay with that, and allow sleep to come as naturally as night comes to the earth. There was a season in my life when I measured the day by the weight in my chest. I would wake before the sun was fully up, and before my feet ever touched the floor, my mind would already be reaching for the same familiar burden. It was not always one single problem, but a steady sense of pressure, as though life were a creditor standing at the door of my thoughts, tapping its finger and waiting for me to answer. In those days, I dreaded small things that other people scarcely noticed. The sound of a knock at the door could tighten my stomach. The arrival of a letter could make my hands feel cold. I would hear the footsteps of the postman and feel a kind of quiet dread rise in me, because I assumed the day would bring another reminder of what I had not yet solved, another demand I did not know how to meet, another proof that I was behind. And because I was afraid, I tried to control everything. I tried to plan life like a man trying to hold water in his hands. I would rehearse conversations in my mind before they happened. I would think through the same problem again and again, as though the 10th repetition might reveal what the first 9 had not. I would make bargains with myself. If I do this, perhaps that will happen. If I say this, perhaps he will respond that way. If I wait, perhaps the worst will pass. My mind worked like a machine that would not shut off. Yet the more I tried to control the outer world, the more the outer world seemed to resist me. Not because it had any power of its own, but because my inner state was one of pressure, and life faithfully mirrored it. I did not understand then that my constant effort was not strength, it was confession. It was me saying, without realizing it, if I do not hold this together, it will fall apart. And life, being obedient, arranged itself to make that confession feel true. I remember one night in particular when the strain became almost unbearable. The day had been filled with the same anxious calculations, the same inward arguments, the same attempt to arrange tomorrow with the mind of a man who did not yet know who he was. When evening came and the house was quiet, the silence did not comfort me. It only gave my thoughts more room to speak. I sat alone with that familiar feeling of necessity, as though the world demanded something from me and would not be satisfied until I had produced it. And I did what so many do. I pleaded, quietly, inwardly. I begged for relief. I asked for a change. I tried to pray the way I had been taught to pray, as though God were somewhere outside of me, listening from a distance, perhaps moved by my desperation. But it was in that very moment, when my pleading felt empty and my words felt thin, that something in me grew tired in a deeper way. Not the tiredness of the body, but the tiredness of the soul that has been trying to carry what it was never meant to carry. And in that exhaustion, I had what I can only call a simple turning. I stopped. I did not stop because I had solved anything. I did not stop because I had figured it out. I stopped because I could not continue to plead from the same state and expect a different outcome. I stopped because I suddenly saw that my supplication was keeping the problem alive. My pleading was the very act of feeding the state of lack. And then, as quietly as the candle flame steadies when the wind dies, I felt a different mood rise within me. It was not excitement. It was not a strained hope. It was rest. It was as though I had finally placed the entire matter into hands more capable than my anxious mind. And in that moment I did something that changed everything for me. I did not ask to be relieved. I accepted relief as present. I did not beg for help. I assumed that help was already given. I did not try to move the world with effort. I moved inwardly into the end. And I rested there. I let the problem go, not by denying that it existed to my senses, but by withdrawing my allegiance from it. I took my attention away from the scene of strain and placed it upon the feeling of completion. It was the night I stopped supplicating and began to rest in God. Now do not misunderstand me. I am not speaking of a lazy resignation. I am speaking of a deliberate inner act, a conscious surrender, a decision to stop negotiating with shadows and to claim the reality of the fulfilled desire in imagination. That night, I did not fall asleep like a man who had lost. I fell asleep like a man who had already been answered. And the most extraordinary part is this. The next morning, the outer world had not yet arranged itself completely, but I could feel that something had shifted. I could feel that the burden was no longer sitting on my heart in the same way. It was as though, inwardly, the door had closed on the old state. And once that door closes, life must find another way to reflect you. Soon after, the bridge of incidents began to appear, naturally and without strain. Conversations unfolded differently. Circumstances moved. What had felt immovable began to soften. Not because I forced it, but because the state from which I was living had changed. I had moved from "I must control this" to "it is already handled." And the world, being a mirror, could not help but follow. So I say to you tonight, as you listen in the quiet of your room, perhaps with your eyes growing heavy, perhaps with your body already drifting towards sleep, there is a night like that for you as well. A night when you stop pleading. A night when you stop wrestling. A night when you stop trying to hold the entire weight of your life in your own trembling hands. And tonight can be that night, because I will show you the exact inner act. Not a theory, not a sermon meant only to inspire. An act, simple, precise, repeatable. An act you can perform while you lie in bed. An act you can perform with your eyes closed and your body relaxed. An act that requires no outward struggle, no perfect words, no exhausting mental labor. You will learn how to listen in a new way, how to surrender without fear, how to assume the end so gently that it feels natural, even inevitable. You will learn how to leave everything in God's hands in the only way that truly works, by placing yourself inwardly in the state where it is already done. And if you remain with me through this message, if you allow it to carry you all the way into its deeper conclusion, I will give you one central phrase, one sentence. Not a chant to repeat mechanically, but a command to accept as final. A sentence that gathers the entire teaching into a single act of surrender. It is a sentence you can whisper at night when the mind wants to argue. A sentence you can hold like a key when the old fear rises. A sentence that, when spoken from the right state, ends the inner struggle at its root. So stay with me. Not because you must strain to stay awake. No, you may drift as you listen. You may rest. But let the deeper part of you remain present. Let the words sink beneath the surface. Because what I will share is designed for the very state you are entering now. The soft borderland between wakefulness and sleep, where the conscious mind loosens and the deeper self becomes receptive. And that is where the transformation happens. For most people have tried to change life by effort. They have tried to change life by pleading, by bargaining, by fear disguised as caution. And they have found that the world remains stubborn, because they were still living in the state of need. They wanted relief, but they lived in anxiety. They wanted freedom, but they lived in bondage. They wanted peace, but they lived in the habit of control. But you will learn tonight what I learned. You do not move life by pleading from the state of lack. You move life by resting in the state of fulfillment. You do not ask God to take it. You give it to God by assuming it is already taken. So as you listen now, let the promise be simple. This night can be the night your old habit of carrying everything ends. This night can be the night you learn the inner rest that is not weakness, but power. This night can be the night you stop supplicating and begin assuming quietly, confidently, it is handled. It is done. I leave everything in God's hands. And in a little while, when the mind is quieter and the body is heavier, I will show you exactly how to enter that state, how to impress it upon the deeper self, and how to fall asleep from the end, so that your very sleep becomes the seal of your faith. Now let me redefine for you what it truly means to leave it in God's hands, because many have misunderstood these words, and through misunderstanding have made them powerless. To the ordinary man, leave it in God's hands sounds like resignation. It sounds like giving up. It sounds like sitting back and hoping that some distant power might take pity and change the situation. And so, when people speak those words, they often speak them with sadness, with defeat, with the feeling of, well, There is nothing I can do, but that is not what I mean. And it is not what the law means. To leave it in God's hands is not abandonment. It is not surrender to failure. It is the cessation of mental effort. It is the end of inner struggle. It is the quiet decision to stop trying to force life from the state of anxiety and to instead rest in the state of fulfillment as a present fact. The outer man calls this inaction. The awakened man knows it is the highest action of all, because the only creative action is inner. The world does not yield to your frantic planning. It does not bow to your worry. It does not respond to your sleepless nights of calculation. The world, I tell you, responds only to your state. When you are anxious, your anxiety is a state. When you are afraid, your fear is a state. When you are desperate to control outcomes, that very desperation is the assumption you live in, and the world, being yourself pushed out, faithfully arranges itself to confirm the assumption you are dwelling in. So the man who attempts to move the world from anxiety is like a man trying to straighten his reflection in a mirror by pushing the glass. He presses here, he rubs there, he becomes furious with the image that will not change, not realizing that the image is only doing what mirrors do. It reflects. It does not initiate. It does not decide. It only obeys. The secret is never to move the mirror. The secret is to change the face. Change the inner expression, and the outer world must follow, quietly and inevitably, because it has no choice. Now, when I say God, I do not mean a being apart from you, seated somewhere beyond the stars, occasionally reaching down to interfere with your circumstances. That concept has comforted many, but it has also kept many in bondage, for it teaches man to live as though he were separate from the power that creates his world. When I speak of God, I speak of the creative power within you. I speak of your own wonderful human imagination. I speak of the I am, the awareness that is your true identity, the center from which all experience flows. You were not given imagination as a pastime. You were given imagination as the very means by which life becomes what it is. It is the womb of creation. It is the workshop of God. And the I am within you is not a phrase. It is the name of the creative presence. It is the sense of being that precedes every description you attach to yourself. So when you say, I am worried, you have used the name of God and joined it to worry, and the world will mirror that union. When you say, I am secure, you have used that same name and joined it to security, and the world will mirror that union. This is why I insist that you must not merely speak new words. You must occupy a new state. And leaving it in God's hands is precisely this. You cease the effort of the anxious mind, and you enter the state of already being what you desire to be, already having what you desire to have, already living the end as present fact. Do you see the difference? Resignation says, nothing can be done. True surrender says, it is done. Resignation is weakness. True surrender is certainty. Resignation collapses into fear. True surrender rises into peace. The error of man is this: he believes the outer world is the cause. He looks at conditions and says, when this changes, I will feel different. He looks at a letter, an account, a conversation, a delay, and he says, this is what determines my life. And then, feeling powerless, he tries to push the world around from that powerlessness. He tries to manipulate people. He tries to force timing. He tries to plan every possible outcome. He tries to rehearse, to defend, to control. And all the while, the state he occupies is the state of a man who does not yet have it. A man who is still threatened, still uncertain, still at the mercy of appearances. And so, although he may be doing many things outwardly, inwardly, he is confirming the very condition he wishes to escape. He is living in the end of failure, while hoping for the end of success. He is standing in the state of bondage while begging for freedom. And the law, being exact, reflects the state, not the hope. I have watched this countless times. I have watched a man pray for abundance while he lives in the mood of scarcity. I have watched a woman desire love while she lives in the mood of abandonment. They think their desire should be enough. They think their effort should count for something. But the law does not respond to longing. It responds to assumption. That is why you must understand tonight that leaving it in God's hands is not a phrase you say to comfort yourself while you remain inwardly the same. It is an act. It is the act of withdrawing your attention from the anxious state and placing it upon the fulfilled state until you feel the shift. Because the moment you feel the shift, you have entered God. You have entered the I am as the state of fulfillment. And once you are in that state, you are no longer trying to get. You are being, you are no longer pleading. You are resting. You are no longer forcing life. You are allowing life to mirror what you have already accepted as true. This is why the most powerful words are not the longest. The most powerful words are those spoken from the deepest inner conviction. And very often, the deepest conviction is silent. It is the peace that follows the acceptance of the end. So if you have been using the words, leave it in God's hands, as a kind of surrender to disappointment, I tell you gently tonight, that is not surrender. That is not God. That is only a weary mind giving up its fight while still believing in defeat. But if you will use them as the inner decision to cease mental effort, to stop the argument within, to stop the anxious rehearsal of problems, and to rest instead in the feeling that it is already settled, then you will discover what those words truly mean. They mean, I no longer carry this as a burden. I no longer rehearse it as a fear. I no longer keep it alive with my attention. I place myself in the end, where it is resolved, and I let the bridge of incidents unfold in perfect order. Now notice this. You do not leave it in God's hands by pushing it away in denial. You leave it in God's hands by bringing it into the only place where change is possible, which is imagination, and changing it there. The world of Caesar, the world of facts and figures and letters and deadlines seems so solid to the senses. But it is only the shadow world. It is the after effect. The true world, the causal world, is within you. It is the world of consciousness, and consciousness is God. So when you leave it in God's hands, you are not tossing it into the air and hoping it lands well. You are returning it to its source. You are taking it back into the creative center and saying inwardly, this is finished. This is resolved. This is already done. And then you cease. You stop the mental labor. You stop the questioning. You stop the constant checking. You stop measuring the outer world for proof, because the demand for proof is the sign that you have not yet truly surrendered. True surrender is rest. True surrender is the Sabbath. True surrender is the calm confidence that if it is done in consciousness, it must appear in the world, for the world is only the externalized form of consciousness. So tonight, as you listen and feel sleep drawing nearer, I want you to take this into your heart gently. You are not being asked to do nothing in the sense of helplessness. You are being asked to do the only thing that truly creates. You are being asked to stop trying to move the world from anxiety, and to begin moving yourself into the state where the world must move on your behalf. And that is what it means to leave everything in God's hands. Now let us go deeper into the fundamental law, the simplest truth, and yet the one most men spend their entire lives overlooking. You do not change conditions, you change state. A condition is only the expression of a state that has been occupied. The condition is the shadow. The state is the substance. The condition is the echo. The state is the voice. And the tragedy of man is that he wrestles with echoes as though they were causes. He argues with shadows as though they had power. He fights with the outer world as though it were alive of itself, not realizing it is only the living reflection of his own inner life. The world you see, the day that meets you, the circumstances that seem to surround you, they are not beginning where you think they begin. They are ending where you think they begin. They are the result, not the reason. If you would understand this, you would stop making your life a constant campaign against appearances. You would stop demanding that conditions prove themselves before you allow yourself peace. You would stop giving your feeling away to the changing report of the senses. Because the senses, I tell you, can only testify to what has already been impressed. They can only show you what you have already been. They cannot show you what you are now assuming, until the assumption has had its time to harden into fact. And so the wise man does not consult the senses for permission to believe. He consults the I am. He consults the state he chooses to occupy, and having occupied it, he rests. The world is an echo. Listen to that word, echo, and feel it. When you speak into a canyon, the sound returns, but the returning sound is never the cause of the original. It is the response. Yet how many men live as though the echo spoke first? They hear the echo of their former assumptions, and they panic, forgetting that what they are hearing is only yesterday answering yesterday. So when life presents you with an old condition, do not treat it as a verdict. Treat it as evidence of what you used to dwell in, and then quietly return to the new state you have chosen. This is why I say the end is the cause. Men think the end comes last. They believe they must travel from present trouble to future relief, and so they live as though relief is a distant event. But in the law of consciousness, the end comes first. The end is the seed. The end is the cause. The end is the state you occupy now, which must externalize itself in due season. You do not create by starting in the middle and hoping you arrive at the desired conclusion. You create by entering the conclusion inwardly and letting the middle rearrange itself to lead you there. That is what I mean by living from the end. When you live from the end, you no longer plead with life. You no longer bargain with time. You no longer ask the world to grant you permission to feel secure. You move inwardly into the feeling of security, and you let the world, which is an obedient echo, rearrange itself to match. Most people, however, reverse the order. They say, "Show me, and I will believe." They demand signs. They demand proof. They demand movement, and in demanding they confess lack. They confess uncertainty. They confess that the state of fulfillment is not yet theirs. But the law does not give proof to satisfy doubt. The law produces proof to reflect conviction. So you do not ask for signs. You become the sign. This is a hard saying for the anxious mind, because the anxious mind believes it must see something outside itself before it can rest. It believes peace must be earned. It believes calm is the reward at the end of struggle. Yet I tell you tonight, peace is not the reward. Peace is the cause. Peace is the proof that the inner act has been accomplished. If you want to know whether you have truly left it in God's hands, do not look for a change in the mailbox. Do not look for a change in the faces of others. Do not look for a sudden burst of outward confirmation. Look for one thing, the presence of peace. Peace is the evidence. Peace is the sign that you have moved from wanting to having. Peace is the sign that you have accepted the end. Peace is the sign that the seed has been planted and you are no longer digging it up to see if it is growing. The moment you truly assume the wish fulfilled, something happens within you that is unmistakable. The strain eases, the frantic mind quiets, the body softens, the breath deepens. You may still see the same outer world, but you no longer react to it as you did. You feel, somewhere beneath the surface, that it is settled. That feeling is the proof, and it is the only proof you need. For the outer proof, the visible evidence, must always follow the inner proof, the invisible acceptance. It cannot be otherwise, because the outer world is the projection of inner states. So I will tell you something that may free you tonight. If you have been waiting for the world to change so that you may finally relax, you have been waiting in the wrong direction. Relax first. Enter peace first. Assume the end first. And then the world will change, because it is compelled to echo the state you occupy. There is a great difference between forcing yourself to be calm and genuinely entering the state of fulfillment. One is repression, the other is realization. Repression says, I must not feel anxious, while anxiety still lives beneath the surface, trembling. Realization says, it is done. And anxiety dissolves because its cause has been removed. Its cause was the belief that the matter was unresolved. When you accept it as resolved, anxiety has nothing left to feed upon. This is why so many prayers fail. They are not prayers at all. They are negotiations, They are complaints dressed in religious language. They are attempts to persuade life to do what the man himself cannot yet accept as true. But the true prayer is assumption. The true prayer is entering the end and resting there. And the sign that you have prayed successfully is not excitement, not strain, not the need to repeat. It is peace. I have had people tell me, Neville, I imagined, and for a moment I felt relief, but then the fear returned. And I say, then imagine again, not to force an outcome, but to return to the state. You are not trying to make something happen. You are selecting a state. And states are like rooms. You may step out of one and into another. The old room may call you back through habit, but you are not bound to it. You can return to the new room again and again until it becomes familiar, until it becomes home. The moment the new state becomes natural, the outer world must reflect it. Do not be disturbed if, at first, peace comes only briefly. Even a moment of true peace is a victory, because it proves you have tasted the end, and what you taste inwardly, you will eat outwardly in time. Remember, the world as you now see it is the echo of past states. It cannot instantly silence itself merely because you have changed within. It must complete its reverberation. But if you remain faithful to the new state, if you persist in the feeling of the end, the echo must change. The sound that returns must eventually match the new voice you are now speaking. So instead of asking, where are my signs? Ask only, where is my peace? And if peace is absent, do not condemn yourself. Simply return to the end. Return to the feeling of it being already done. Return to the sensation of relief, as though the burden has been lifted. Return to the quiet, knowing that you have placed it in God's hands, meaning you have placed it in consciousness, the only place where creation occurs. And when peace is present, even in a small degree, honor it, protect it. Do not argue with appearances. Do not rehearse the old story. Do not seek confirmation. Rest. For your rest is not laziness. Your rest is faith. And faith, when it is genuine, always produces its own evidence. Not first in the world without, but first in the world within, as peace. So tonight, let this be your gentle measure. You are not striving for a sign. You are becoming the sign. You are becoming the man, the woman who already lives in the fulfilled state. And the proof of that fulfilled state is the quiet calm that settles over you when you know deeply that it is finished. And as you drift nearer to sleep, allow this truth to sink into you like a warm cloak. The end is the cause, the world is the echo, and peace is the proof. There is a burden in man that is heavier than any debt, any letter, any circumstance, and it is the burden of trying to control what should be entrusted to God. Most do not recognize this burden at first, because they call it responsibility, they call it caution, they call it being realistic. But if you observe yourself honestly, you will discover that much of what you call responsibility is inward strain. It is the secret tightening of the mind around a problem. It is the silent insistence, I must keep thinking about this, or it will fall apart. It is the fear that if you do not grip it, no one will. And so the man lies down at night, but he does not rest. The body is on the bed, but the mind is pacing. He repeats the scene, repeats the words, repeats the fear, repeats the possible outcomes, as though by rehearsing the problem he could produce the solution. He calls this thinking, but much of the time it is only gripping. This inner gripping is one of the great thieves of peace. It is not always dramatic. At times it is very subtle. It appears as a little tightening in the chest when the thought arises, a slight contraction in the throat, a hardening in the belly, a shallow breath, a need to go over the matter one more time, and then one more time again, a restless urge to check, to calculate, to predict, to prepare for every possible disappointment. And because it is habitual, many men no longer notice they are doing it. They have lived so long in inward tension that tension feels normal. They do not call it suffering, they call it life. But the body knows. The body always knows the state you are occupying. You may say with your lips, I trust God, and still your shoulders are raised as though carrying a weight. You may say, "It is done," and still your jaw is held tightly, your breath thin, your chest braced for impact. The words may be noble, but the body reveals the deeper prayer. And there is no condemnation in seeing this. It is mercy to see it. For once you recognize inner gripping, you can begin to release it. Let me describe it plainly, so that the one listening tonight may recognize himself without shame. Inner gripping is the feeling of mentally holding a problem in your hands and refusing to set it down. It is waking and immediately reaching for the same concern before your feet touch the floor. It is speaking inwardly to the problem all day, asking it questions it cannot answer. It is replaying conversations before they happen and after they happen. It is saying, "What if?" until the mind becomes a hall of mirrors. It is trying to move life by pressure, and pressure cannot create what only surrender can receive. There is a strange belief in man that if he relaxes, he is being careless. If he stops worrying, he is being irresponsible. If he releases the problem inwardly, he is abandoning it. But this is not true. To release is not to neglect. To release is to stop worshipping your own anxiety as though it were wisdom. You are never helped by rumination. You are never aided by panic repeated. You are never strengthened by inwardly squeezing the same thought until it has no life left in it. The solution is not born from the clenched state. The solution is received in the surrendered state. That is why I tell you what most men call effort is often only fear, refusing to be still. When I speak of letting go, I do not mean becoming passive in the world of action. I mean releasing the inward clutching. I mean ceasing to hold the problem in consciousness as though your tension were the power that sustains the universe. God does not require your strain. God requires your acceptance. And because God, as I use the word, is your own wonderful human imagination, your own I am. To leave it in God's hands is to leave it in the deeper creative power within you, and stop interfering with it through anxious repetition. The anxious man plants a seed and then digs it up every hour to see whether it has begun to sprout. The surrendered man plants the seed and lets the earth do its work. This inner gripping can become almost physical in its intensity. You may feel it tonight if you listen carefully while I speak. Perhaps there is a matter in your life that has occupied your thoughts for days or weeks. As soon as you remember it, notice what the body does. Do not judge it. Just notice. Perhaps the shoulders rise slightly. Perhaps the chest becomes firm, as if preparing to bear a blow. Perhaps the tongue presses against the roof of the mouth. Perhaps the brow tightens. Perhaps the breath, which a moment ago moved freely, now becomes shallow and quick. Perhaps the stomach pulls inward. That is the body entering the posture of control. It is trying to brace itself against an imagined future. And this is why so many remain exhausted even when they have done very little outwardly. They are laboring inwardly all day long. They are carrying invisible furniture through the house of the mind. To such a one, I say tonight, you may set it down. Not tomorrow, not when the evidence improves, not when others agree. Now, there is an art to this, and like all art, it becomes natural with practice. At first, when I say let go, many imagine a dramatic moment, as though they must force themselves into serenity. But true release is often quiet. It may begin with one honest recognition. I am gripping this. That recognition alone begins to loosen the knot. Then, rather than wrestling with the thought, you shift from the problem to the state. Not, how do I solve this? But what would my body feel like if it were already resolved? Do you hear the difference? The first question keeps you in the chamber of effort. The second opens the door to the end. And when you ask, what would it feel like if this were already resolved? You begin to discover something beautiful. The body knows that answer too. It knows how relief feels. It knows how a burden feels when it has been lifted. It knows the exhale that comes when the letter is opened and the matter is settled. It knows the softening that comes when there is nothing more to brace against. So let me describe the feeling of release physically, because many who listen while drifting towards sleep will understand it more deeply through sensation than through philosophy. When you truly begin to let go, the shoulders no longer strain upward as though they must hold the sky. They begin to descend of their own accord, not collapsed in defeat, but settled in trust. The back of the neck softens, the jaw loosens, the forehead opens, the eyes, even closed, seem less busy. The chest, which was held tight like a fist, begins to widen. There is more room in it. The breath no longer stops at the top. It travels lower. It fills more gently. It leaves without effort. The belly softens. The hands, even if resting still, lose that subtle impulse to clench. The heartbeat, sometimes loud with anticipation, becomes quieter, less demanding, and most importantly, there is a change in the inner atmosphere. You no longer feel as though you are leaning into the future, trying to prevent something. You feel held. You feel carried. You feel, if only for a moment, that the matter is no longer in your hands. This is not imagination in the ordinary sense. This is a state, and the body is entering the Sabbath. You see, the Sabbath is not merely a day on a calendar. It is a state of consciousness in which effort has ceased because the work is accepted as finished. When your body enters this Sabbath, you can feel it. The nervous insistence subsides. The compulsion to mentally revisit the problem weakens. The need to produce an immediate answer fades. There is still awareness, but no strain. Stillness, but not fear. Quiet, but not emptiness. This is one of the practical signs that you have truly begun to let go. Not that the world has changed yet, but that your body has stopped fighting the world. The body, in its own humble way, becomes a witness to faith. And this is why I urge those who listen before sleep, do not try first to force a perfect thought. Begin by noticing the grip and releasing it physically. Sometimes the body opens the door that the mind has kept shut. If the shoulders are tight, let them fall. If the jaw is clenched, let it loosen. If the breath is shallow, let it deepen without force. If the chest is guarded, let it soften, as though the answer has already come. Then, from that softened place, whisper inwardly the truth you choose to live by, not as a struggle, as a resting place. Something as simple as, "It is in God's hands now," or "I release this completely," or "It is finished," or "I am safe, I am carried." And if the body responds with even a slight wave of relief, honor it. That wave is not small. It is the beginning of the Sabbath. It is consciousness moving from control to trust, from labor to acceptance. Most men do the opposite. They wait for the body to relax after the outer world changes. But the law works inwardly first. The body relaxes as the sign of inner acceptance, and then the outer world follows. So tonight, if you feel the old urge to grip, do not be troubled. You have likely practiced gripping for years. You need not condemn the habit. Simply notice it and release again. The old state may return many times. Release many times. Each release is an act of faith. Each softening is a declaration. Each exhale is a quiet prayer. And little by little, what was once an effort becomes your new nature. You begin to recognize the moment anxiety enters, not as a command to obey, but as a signal to return to the Sabbath. You begin to feel that peace is not something you must earn from circumstances, but something you can enter by ceasing inward struggle. You begin to understand, in the body itself, what it means to leave it in God's hands. For when you have truly left it there, your chest no longer guards, your shoulders no longer carry, your breath no longer flees. The whole organism begins to rest in the unseen decision you have made. This is the art of letting go. It is not dramatic, it is sacred, it is not weakness. It is mastery, it is not forgetting the matter. It is releasing your frightened claim over the matter and returning it to the only power that can transform it. And as you practice this tonight, while sleep draws near, let your body become the altar of surrender. Let every softening be worship. Let every exhale be trust. Let every unclenching be a silent confession. I no longer need to hold what God is already holding. Then the Sabbath will come upon you, not as an idea, but as a living stillness. And in that stillness, The creative work continues without your strain. Now, when a man has begun to release the burden of control, a very beautiful thing becomes possible. He can pray correctly. I do not mean correctly in the sense of ceremony, nor in the sense of borrowed language, nor in the sense of sounding holy to the ears of others. I mean correctly in the sense that prayer matches the law. For prayer, if it is to transform life, must be more than words spoken into the dark. It must be an inner act. It must carry the tone of fulfillment. The mistake most make is simple, and because it is simple, it is often overlooked. They pray as one who has not received. They ask and ask and ask again. And in the asking they reaffirm absence. Their words may be devout, but the state from which they pray is still waiting, still straining, still uncertain. And then they wonder why peace does not come. The pattern is given to you in the words, I thank you, Father. Notice the order. Not, I will thank you when I see it. Not, I will be grateful once the evidence appears. But gratitude before the evidence. Thanksgiving before the senses agree. This is not piety. This is law. When I say, I thank you, Father, I am not trying to flatter a distant deity. I am entering the state of the wish fulfilled. I am assuming the thing is done and giving thanks from that end. Gratitude, in this sense, is not courtesy. It is assumption made gentle. It is faith made warm. It is the natural emotional tone of one who inwardly accepts that the work is finished. You can always know the state from which you are praying by listening to the feeling beneath the words. If there is urgency, fear, bargaining, pressure, then the prayer is still a plea. But if there is softness, relief, quiet certainty, then prayer has become thanksgiving. And thanksgiving is one of the most powerful forms of prayer because it implies completion. Think of it plainly. A man does not sincerely give thanks for what he believes he has not received. He may hope, he may beg, he may negotiate. But true thanks arise when something is accepted as already given. So when you give thanks before seeing, you are not pretending. You are choosing the end. You are saying, in effect, I accept this in consciousness now, and because I accept it now, I thank you now. This is why gratitude can feel so intimate when done rightly. It is not stiff, it is not heavy, it is not a performance. It is often quiet, personal, almost tender, like speaking in the dark to the deepest part of yourself and feeling for a moment that you are heard, because there is no separation between the one who speaks and the one who fulfills. Many have been taught gratitude as duty. Be grateful as a command. But I am speaking of something much deeper than moral instruction. Gratitude is creative. Gratitude changes the one who gives it. It shifts the body, the breath, the inner climate. It loosens the grasping mind and leads it into possession. The anxious man asks for proof. The grateful man rests, as though proof were already on the way, because inwardly he has accepted the gift. And this is especially important for the one listening while drifting towards sleep, because in the drowsy state, the mood you carry is impressed deeply. If you go into sleep with worry, you impress worry. If you go into sleep with strained pleading, you impress strain. But if you go into sleep with gratitude, even quiet gratitude, you impress completion. You fall asleep not as one abandoned, but as one held. Do not think you must use grand phrases. The soul has no need of ornament. A short sentence felt deeply is worth more than many paragraphs spoken mechanically. In fact, for the one who is tired, burdened, or trying to rest, the simplest words are often the best. Soft words, living words, words that do not agitate the mind, but settle it. You may say inwardly, very gently, thank you, it is already being taken care of. Feel what that does. It does not force, it does not strain, it allows. Or, thank you, Father, I can rest now. That is a beautiful prayer. It carries surrender, it carries trust. It gives the body permission to stop guarding. Or, thank you for the peace that is already here. Do you see? Even if the outer matter is not yet visible in its full form, you can always enter through peace. Peace is the first fruit. Peace is often the earliest sign that prayer has shifted from begging to assumption. And when you thank for peace, you are thanking from the state that allows all else to unfold. Another gentle form, very intimate and simple, is thank you for going before me. This does not sound hard. It does not sound severe. It sounds like trust. It implies that the way is already being prepared. It removes the burden of forcing outcomes and returns the heart to quiet reliance. Or, thank you. It is done in ways I cannot yet see. This is a profound sentence when felt. It does not deny appearances, yet it refuses to be ruled by them. It places your identity in the unseen fulfillment rather than in the visible delay. You may also use thank you, Father, all is well, and all is being made clear. Notice how this soothes the mind. It does not demand that you understand every step now. It accepts divine order without mental violence. For some, the word Father feels natural and tender. For others, a simpler address feels more intimate. Use what brings you nearer to trust, not what makes you feel distant. You may say thank you, alone, if spoken with feeling. You may say, thank you, my God. You may say, thank you, I am held. The form matters less than the state. The state is the secret. Yet I return again to this pattern because it is so easily missed, thanksgiving before sight. This is the correct prayer because it aligns you with the fulfilled end. It is not trying to make God move. It is moving yourself into union with what is already finished in imagination. And when gratitude is genuine, even for a few moments, you will often feel a physical sign of right prayer. The breath deepens. The chest softens. The mind stops demanding immediate answers. The body begins to enter the Sabbath. There may even come a slight warmth, a quiet relief, a sense that the matter is no longer pressing against you with the same force. Do not dismiss that. It is not imagination in the trivial sense. It is a shift of state. You are learning to pray as one who receives. Most men pray and then immediately inspect the world for response. They look for movement, for evidence, for signs. And by this they reveal that they have not yet prayed in thanksgiving. For one who has truly given thanks has for that moment accepted. And because he has accepted, he can rest. This does not mean you will never feel the old thoughts return. They may return. But now you know what to do. Do not wrestle with them. Return quietly to gratitude. Not forced gratitude, but chosen gratitude. A simple inward turning. Thank you. I do not need to carry this tonight. Thank you, Father. You have heard me. Thank you. I can sleep in peace. Short, intimate, living phrases. Let them be like soft footsteps into rest. And if at first you feel nothing, do not condemn yourself. Many have practiced worry for years and gratitude only in moments of convenience. Be patient. Speak gently. Do not try to manufacture emotion. Sometimes gratitude begins as willingness, and willingness deepens into peace. Even a sincere desire to trust is already a turning of the heart. You are not trying to impress God with language. You are allowing yourself to enter the state in which the answer is accepted. There is a tenderness in this kind of prayer that many have never known. The hard religious mind may shout, demand, threaten itself with doubt, repeat formulas out of fear. But the heart that has begun to understand the law prays more quietly. It thanks before seeing. It rests before proof. It lets the unseen be real enough to receive gratitude now. That is not weakness. That is mastery. So tonight, as the body grows heavier and the mind begins to loosen its hold, let gratitude be your final movement inward. Not long, not strained, just true. Thank you, Father. I can let this go. Thank you. It is already in good hands. Thank you for the peace that tells me it is done. If you let even one of these sink beneath the surface of words and become feeling, you will have prayed correctly. And in that gratitude, the heart enters its rightful posture, not begging, not bargaining, but quietly receiving. And once the heart has learned this gentler prayer, once gratitude has softened the inner strain and the body has begun to loosen, You arrive quite naturally at the threshold where the seed is planted most deeply. I have spoken often of this borderland, and I do so again because it is one of the great mercies given to man. There is a moment each night when the busy surface of the mind begins to fade, when the hard edges of the day lose their grip, and you are no longer fully concerned with the world of facts, and not yet surrendered to sleep. That is the door. Most pass through it unconsciously. They carry into it the same worry they carried all day. They rehearse conversations, replay disappointments, anticipate tomorrow's burdens, and then wonder why tomorrow resembles today. But the one who understands the law learns to use this threshold deliberately, tenderly, without force. He sees it for what it is, the entrance to the creative chamber, the gate through which an assumption enters the deeper mind and becomes flesh in time. This state, akin to sleep, is not some dramatic trance, nor must you struggle to produce it. You already know it well. It is that lovely drifting condition when you could move if you wished, but you do not wish to. The body is comfortable, the mind no longer sharp with analysis, and thoughts begin to take on a softer, more floating quality. You are there almost every night. The art is simply to enter it consciously, and plant wisely before sleep carries you fully away. When I say this is a door, I mean precisely that. In the waking state, the mind argues, compares, resists, asks how, asks when, asks by what means. At the threshold, much of that resistance relaxes. The guard at the gate grows drowsy, and what you feel as true in that condition sinks more easily into the deeper self. So you do not need to battle the mind. You simply wait for the natural softening, and then you impress it with something worthy of becoming your tomorrow. Now the question arises, what scene should you choose? And here, many become unnecessarily complicated. They think they must imagine some grand spectacle, some elaborate vision with many people and many details. But the law does not require complexity. In fact, the smaller and more natural the scene, the better. Choose a short moment that would imply your desire has already been fulfilled. Not the process, not the struggle, not the middle of the story. The end implied in one simple act. If your desire is peace in a troubled matter, do not imagine endless explanations. Imagine instead a single quiet moment after it is resolved. Perhaps you are lying in bed and feel that sweet relief in your chest while saying inwardly, "It is all settled now." Perhaps you hear a loved one say, very simply, "I'm so glad everything worked out." Perhaps you feel your own face soften in the dark as you realize there is nothing more to carry. Let the scene imply completion. If the matter concerns provision, you need not build a complex financial drama. Choose a natural end. You might imagine opening a letter and feeling that inward release that says it has been handled. You might hear yourself say, "Thank you, Father, that is done." You might imagine paying what must be paid with a feeling not of loss, but of ease. The outer form varies, but the principle is the same. The scene must be small, believable, and final in implication. If the desire concerns harmony in a relationship, do not rehearse old injuries in imagination while trying to fix them. Choose the fulfilled state. Imagine a gentle embrace. Imagine hearing kind words, spoken in a familiar voice. Imagine waking with no heaviness, where the heaviness once lived. Let the scene be simple enough that you can return to it without strain and feel it as a lived moment rather than a performance. The best imaginal scene is often one that could happen naturally the day after your wish were fulfilled. That is a good test. If your desire were already a fact, what small thing would you do? Hear, touch, or feel? Choose that. A handshake, a sigh of relief, a friend's congratulations, the weight of a wedding band, if marriage is desired, the feel of a pillow under your head as you drift to sleep, in peace after the matter is settled. Always think in terms of naturalness, not spectacle. And notice this carefully. The scene should imply the end without requiring explanation. You are not there to convince yourself with speeches. You are there to assume through experience. A single sentence heard vividly can do more than a long dialogue. A single tactile sensation can anchor the state more deeply than pages of mental talking. The mind at that threshold receives feeling and impression more readily than argument. So I tell you, make it brief, very brief. A small loop you can repeat gently. A few seconds perhaps, no more. Why brief? Because if it is long, the waking mind begins to interfere. It starts managing details, correcting images, judging whether you did it properly. But a short scene can be entered again and again with ease, like dipping a cloth into perfume until it carries the fragrance. You are not trying to entertain yourself. You are impregnating the deeper mind with a mood and a fact. Let it also be sensory, not merely verbal, not merely conceptual. Be in it. If you are imagining a letter, feel the paper in your hand. If you are imagining someone speaking, hear the tone of their voice. If you are imagining rest, feel the physical heaviness of relief in your body. If you are imagining an embrace, feel the warmth and closeness. The senses are not used here to prove the outer world, but to make the imaginal act vivid enough that it carries conviction. Do not see yourself as from a distance as though watching a stage play, unless that comes naturally to you and carries feeling. Better, in most cases, to view the scene from the first-person point of view. Be the one touching, hearing, breathing, receiving. If you imagine from the outside, you may admire the scene. If you imagine from within, you may inhabit it. And it is occupancy of the state that transforms, not observation alone. This is why I say the final scene should feel natural. If the scene is too grand, too foreign, too far from your present capacity to feel, the mind resists. It says this is fantasy. But if the scene is modest and intimate, the deeper self accepts it more gently. There is power in simplicity. A calm thank you, a relieved exhale, a friend's hand on your shoulder. A sentence such as, I knew it would be all right. Such things pass the threshold easily because they carry no strain. Now, as for the manner of repetition, this too is often misunderstood. You are not to repeat in a hard, mechanical way as though trying to hammer reality into place. The repetition must be soft, almost caressing. You return to the same little scene again and again, not from desperation, but from quiet preference, until it acquires the tones of reality, like listening to a gentle melody, until it settles into your nervous system. The purpose of repetition is not force. It is familiarization. Play the scene, feel it, let it fade, return to it, play it again, hear the same words, touch the same object, feel the same relief. If another thought comes, do not fight it. Let it pass and return. If the image blurs, do not panic. Return to the feeling. If you cannot see clearly, then hear. If hearing is difficult, then feel. If feeling is faint, then begin with your gratitude phrase, and let it lead you into the scene. The law is not offended by your imperfection. It responds to sincerity and persistence in state. And always remember, the aim is not to stay awake and perform a perfect exercise. The aim is to fall asleep in the assumption. This is very important. Many become so intent on doing SATs correctly that they remain mentally active. They keep checking themselves, correcting themselves, asking whether they have impressed the subconscious. This is old control wearing spiritual clothing. Be kinder than that. The doorway opens best to gentleness. You may begin with a simple inward thanksgiving, as we spoke of before. Thank you, Father. I can rest now. Let those words soften the chest and quiet the breath. Then enter your little scene. Hear the phrase. Feel the completion. Repeat softly. And if sleep takes you before the scene becomes perfectly vivid, do not be troubled. If you fall asleep in the direction of the wish fulfilled, that itself is a beautiful act. Night after night, this gentle planting accumulates power. There is also wisdom in choosing one scene and remaining faithful to it for a time, rather than changing it each night out of impatience. The restless mind seeks novelty. Faith seeks occupancy. If you choose a good final scene, stay with it. Let it become familiar. Let your body begin to recognize it. Let your nervous system learn. When I enter this scene, I release. In this way, the very act becomes associated with Sabbath, and sleep itself begins to feel like trust rather than escape. And if on some nights the heart feels heavy and the scene seems difficult, then reduce it. Make it even smaller. Perhaps only a hand on your chest and the inward words, "It is in God's hands now." Perhaps only one breath of relief and "thank you." Perhaps only the feeling of lying down with nothing more to solve tonight. Do not abandon the law because one evening is difficult. Adapt with tenderness and continue. A seed is still a seed, though small. You will know you are beginning to enter the state rightly. When the body starts to cooperate, the jaw loosens, the eyes become still, the shoulders drop, the breathing lengthens. The compulsion to think through the problem weakens. You may feel as though the matter is moving farther away, not in neglect, but in completion. That is a good sign. It means the inner man is accepting what the outer man has ceased to clutch. Some ask, how many times should I repeat the scene? There is no sacred number. Repeat until the mood of the wish fulfilled begins to feel natural, and then let sleep have you. Sometimes this comes quickly. Sometimes the old habits of mind take longer to quiet. The principle remains the same. Soft repetition, sensory reality. End implied, no strain, until sleep. Others ask, what if I fall asleep and wake in worry again? Then begin again the next night, and if needed, during the day, return for a moment to the feeling. Not as labor, but as remembrance. The state akin to sleep is a privileged door, yes, but the assumption can be revisited in waking moments as well. Still, the night is precious, because the mind is most impressionable there. Guard that threshold. Enter it with reverence, not fear. And let me say this, for the one listening while drifting now. Do not turn this into a burden. The point of this teaching is not to give you another thing to control. It is to show you where to yield consciously. The door is already built into your life. Every night you approach it. Tonight you may pass through it differently. Tonight you may carry not the old story, but the fulfilled feeling. Tonight you may sow peace. So as you continue listening, let the body grow heavy and untroubled. Let the day recede. Let the need to understand everything recede with it. Choose one small scene that implies the matter is settled. Make it natural. Make it brief. Give it touch, sound, breath, feeling. Repeat it softly, as one rocking a child to sleep. And then let yourself drift, not as one waiting for rescue, but as one who has already placed the seed in the soil and now trusts the night to do its work. For this is the art, not to force the harvest, but to plant rightly at the threshold and sleep in faith. And when this becomes your habit, the nights themselves will begin to change. They will cease to be the hour of replaying burdens and become the holy hour of planting completion. Then, sleep is no longer merely rest for the body. It becomes the quiet workshop of God within you, where the unseen receives your assumption and prepares tomorrow in its image. And now, having led you to the threshold, I must give you the central sentence for this night, the one I want you to carry gently into sleep, not as a charm, not as a superstition, but as a doorway into a state. I give it to you in simplicity. First, because truth is always simpler than the restless mind expects. Leave it in God's hands. It is done. Say it slowly within yourself. Leave it in God's hands. It is done. Do not rush across the words. Let them descend. Let the first part release the burden, and let the second part seal the work. The first loosens the grasp of fear. The second ends the argument. Together they form a movement of the soul, surrender and completion. If you prefer an even shorter form, use this. It is in God's hands now. You may take that into sleep exactly as it is. It is gentle. It does not strain the mind. It does not demand effort. It simply places the matter where it belongs and allows the heart to rest. For many, this shorter phrase will be easier to repeat as drowsiness comes, and that is perfectly well. The law does not require length. It requires reality of feeling. And if your nature responds to a more tender, more poetic tone, Then use this, Father. I place it in your hands, and I rest in the finished work. That form may help those whose hearts open through intimacy and devotion. It carries gratitude, surrender, and certainty all in one breath. But again, do not imagine that one arrangement of words is more powerful than another. The power is not in the poetry. The power is in the state into which the words usher you. You may also use this quiet variation, especially if the body is tense and the mind has been overworking the problem. I release this completely. God in me has already resolved it. Notice the feeling there. Not postponement, not hope, already resolved. That is the secret. If the phrase leaves you waiting, adjust it. If it leaves you resting, keep it. For the one who wants the plainest possible command, one that the mind cannot decorate, one almost bare enough to slip directly into the deeper self, then take this: I let go. It is finished. There is tremendous power in such simplicity when spoken from conviction. I let go releases the personal struggle. It is finished claims the divine completion. If you can feel even a small exhale of relief while saying it, you are moving rightly. Now listen carefully, because this is where many misunderstand and miss the fruit. The phrase is not magic. The words themselves are not a mechanical key. You cannot speak them while inwardly clinging to fear and expect the words alone to do the work. I am not giving you an incantation. I am giving you a bridge into a state of consciousness. The sentence is only useful insofar as it helps you become the one who has truly released the burden and accepted the end. You could repeat, leave it in God's hands, 100 times and remain in anxiety. If, by those words, you secretly mean, I hope something helps me, and you could whisper it once and feel your whole body soften into trust, and that one whisper would be enough. Why? Because the law answers the state, not the count. It responds to what you are, not merely to what you say. So when you use the phrase, do not ask, did I say it right? Ask, what did it do to my state? Did it loosen the chest? Did it quiet the inner argument? Did it make you less eager to force a solution tonight? Did it produce even a moment of peace? If yes, then the phrase has served its purpose. Stay there. That peace is the proof that you have shifted from control into trust, from supplication into assumption, from strain into Sabbath. Let the sentence work on you like warm water over clenched hands. At first, the hands may still hold their shape. The habit of gripping is old. But with gentle repetition, they open. So too with the mind. The old habit will try to return to the problem, to rehearse, to calculate, to predict. When it does, do not wrestle. Simply return to the phrase. Leave it in God's hands. It is done, not as battle, but as return. Not as effort, but as remembrance. And when I say God's hands, understand me in the sense I always mean, not some being outside of you who may or may not intervene according to favor, but the living God of your own wonderful human imagination, the I am within you, the creative power that receives impression and externalizes it. So the phrase is not abandonment to chance. It is the conscious transfer of the burden from the anxious surface mind to the creative depth of being. You are not saying, I no longer care. You are saying, I no longer interfere. That is a profound difference. The world calls that passivity, because it does not understand inner causation. But in truth, this is the highest form of action. You have imagined the end, you have felt it. You have planted it in the threshold of sleep. Now you refuse to tear up the seed with restless thought. The phrase helps you remain faithful to the planted state. Use the phrase then as one would use a door handle. You do not worship the handle. You do not analyze the metal. You use it to enter the room. Once inside, you rest. In the same way, speak the sentence until it opens the feeling of relief. Then dwell in that relief. If words fall away and only peace remains, let the words go. Peace is the true prayer. The phrase has done its work. There may be nights when the more poetic version carries you, and nights when only the short command feels possible. That is all right. Choose according to the mood of the moment, but keep the essence unchanged. Release the burden. Accept the completion. Whether you say, "It is in God's hands now," or "Father, I place it in your hands, and I rest in the finished work," the inward movement must be the same. Surrender, then rest. And if tears come while saying it, let them come. Sometimes the body has carried control for so long that true surrender feels like grief at first, because something old is dying. The belief that you must hold everything together by strain. Let that old belief die. Let the tears wash the inner gripping out of the system. Then return to the sentence softly, until tears become quiet, and quiet becomes trust. I will tell you how I want you to use it tonight. As drowsiness comes and the mind begins to wander, gather yourself gently. Feel the body on the bed. Let the shoulders drop. Let the jaw unclench. Then say inwardly, with meaning, "Leave it in God's hands. It is done." Pause. Feel what happens. If the mind starts again, repeat it. If peace deepens, let the words become fewer. If sleep comes, let it come while the feeling remains. And tomorrow, if the old concern presents itself again, do not conclude that you failed. Simply use the sentence once more, not to begin from nothing, but to return to the state you entered. This is why I call it the central phrase of this teaching. It is simple enough to remember in the night, gentle enough for the tired mind, and deep enough to carry you from effort into faith. In time, you will notice something beautiful. The phrase will no longer feel like something you are doing. It will become a natural posture of consciousness. A difficult matter appears, and inwardly you will know how to move. Release, trust, finish. The sentence trains the soul into Sabbath. It teaches the nervous system the rhythm of the fulfilled life. Assume, place, rest. So take it now as your command for this night, and use it not as magic, but as entry into the state where miracles become natural. Leave it in God's hands. It is done. Let that be enough. Let it carry you. Let it quiet the last argument of the day. Let it become the final tone in consciousness before sleep, until the deeper self receives it as truth and the world, in its appointed way, begins to echo back your rest. Now let me take you by the hand in the most practical way and lead you into the night's work so gently that it does not feel like work at all. I want this to be simple enough for the tired mind, soft enough for the heavy heart, and clear enough that you may return to it night after night until it becomes as natural as sleep itself. You are not trying to perform well. You are not trying to force a result. You are only preparing yourself to receive, to yield, to enter that quiet threshold where the deeper self accepts what you feel to be true. When you lie down tonight, do not begin at once with words. Begin with permission. Give yourself permission to stop for the day. Let that be the first act. Say inwardly, if you like, "For this night I lay down all effort." You need not solve anything in bed. You need not complete the argument before sleep. You need not understand the bridge of incidents. The day has had its say. The world has spoken enough. Now let the inner chamber open. Feel the surface beneath your body. Let your weight be received. Do not hold yourself up from the bed as though you must remain on guard. The body has a wisdom of its own. Trust it. Let the back settle. Let the legs become heavy in a pleasant way. Let the hands rest without instruction. If they are clenched, do not scold them. Simply notice and soften. The softening is enough. Everything tonight is gentle. Nothing is forced. Bring your attention first to your breathing, not to control it harshly, but to accompany it. Breathe in quietly, and exhale a little longer than you inhaled. Then again, let the breath lengthen the body from within. With each exhalation, feel as though the day is leaving you. Let the shoulders loosen on the out breath. Let the muscles around the eyes release. Let the tongue rest in the mouth. You would be amazed how much strain men carry there without knowing it. Ease the tongue, and often the mind follows. Take another slow breath, and as you exhale, feel the chest soften. not collapse, but soften. The chest is where so many hold the burden of tomorrow. Tonight there is no tomorrow to carry. There is only this moment, this bed, this breath, this inward turning. Breathe again and let the belly relax. There is no need to brace yourself for life in this hour. Life is not asking you to defend yourself now. It is asking you to trust. If thoughts begin to rush in immediately, do not fight them. Do not wrestle with them. Do not make an enemy of thinking. Let them pass like distant conversations heard through a wall. You are not required to attend every voice. The beginner's mistake is to try to empty the mind by force. I am not asking that of you. I am asking only that you shift your loyalty. Let the thoughts be there if they must, but give your allegiance to the feeling of settling, to the breath, to the quiet descent towards sleep. If the mind starts to analyze the teaching, stop very gently, not with irritation, but with kindness. This is not the hour for analysis. Tell yourself softly, not now. If the mind begins to review the problem, do the same. Not now. If it begins to plan tomorrow, not now. You are not denying life. You are choosing the hour in which you will meet it. This hour is for planting, not for planning. This hour is for assuming, not for solving. Now as your breathing becomes a little more even, begin to feel drowsiness as a friend. Most men resist it. They drift towards sleep, then pull themselves back by thinking. Tonight do not pull back. Let yourself drift. Let the body grow heavier. Let the edges of attention blur slightly. If your thoughts become less orderly, that is good. If images rise and fade, that is good. You are approaching the gate. Do not become excited that you are doing it correctly. Excitement can wake the mind again. Stay simple. Stay soft. When you feel that gentle borderland beginning, choose your scene. Do not choose a grand spectacle. Choose something small, natural, and final. A short moment that would imply your desire is already fulfilled, and the matter truly rests in God's hands. Perhaps you hear a loved one say with ease in their voice, "I'm so glad it all worked out." Perhaps you feel your own head sink into the pillow with a deep, relieved exhale, knowing everything is resolved. Perhaps you imagine a simple morning scene where you rise in peace, with no urgency, no burden, no inner pressure. Let it be ordinary. The more natural it feels, the more easily, the deeper self receives it. Do not stand outside the scene, looking at yourself. Enter it. Be in it. If you choose a room, feel the room around you. If you choose a voice, hear it near you, not far off. If you choose a touch, feel the warmth of the hand, the texture of cloth, the weight of the blanket, the softness of the pillow beneath your cheek. Let one or two sensory details be enough. You do not need many. The mind becomes restless when you demand too much detail. The single real detail is better than 100 strained ones. Now bring in the central phrase, but bring it in gently at the right moment, not as a command barked at the mind, but as a seal placed upon the state. You may say inwardly, "Leave it in God's hands. It is done." Then return to the scene. Or let the scene come first, and when you feel the relief in it, whisper inwardly, "It is in God's hands now." There is no rigid order. The law is not mechanical. Use the phrase where it deepens the feeling of release and completion. As you repeat the scene, do not loop it sharply or quickly. Let it move in a soft rhythm, almost as though it were rocking you to sleep. The scene may last only a few seconds. That is enough. Let it replay lightly. Hear the words, feel the relief. Rest again. Hear the words, feel the relief. Rest again. Never force, never strain for vividness. If it becomes a little hazy as sleep approaches, that is perfectly right. The subconscious does not require theatrical clarity. It receives feeling. And as you go deeper, I want you to remember these small reminders, because they will save you from unnecessary struggle. Do not fight the mind. Do not analyze the process. Do not check whether it is working. Do not tighten the body to hold the scene. Do not chase a perfect feeling. Let a small true feeling be enough. If relief comes only as a tiny softening in the chest, that is enough. If peace comes only for one breath, that is enough. The seed is planted in sincerity, not in performance. If you lose the scene and find yourself thinking again, simply return. No frustration, no judgment. Return as many times as needed, and let each return be gentle. In truth, this repeated returning is itself a beautiful training of consciousness. You are teaching yourself not to be dragged by old habits of fear. You are teaching yourself how to come home. Every soft return says to the deeper self, this is where I live now, in peace, in trust, in the finished state. If anxiety rises strongly in the body, do not pretend it is not there. Meet it with breath. Breathe in slowly, and on the out breath say inwardly, no struggle now. Again breathe in, and on the out breath, no analysis now. Again breathe in, and on the out breath, it is in God's hands now. Let the breath carry the phrase into the body. Sometimes the body accepts what the mind resists, and once the body softens, the mind follows without argument. You may find it helpful to relax the body in simple stages. Bring awareness to the forehead and smooth it inwardly. Then the eyes and the muscles around them. Then the jaw. Then the throat. Then the shoulders. Then the chest. Then the belly. Then the hands. Then the legs. Do not linger too long. Just a gentle sweep of blessing through the body, as though you were saying to each part, you may rest now. This is not separate from prayer. It is prayer in the language of the flesh. When the scene begins to feel real enough that your breathing changes, or your body gives a deeper exhale without your forcing it, pay attention. That is often the sign that the state is taking hold. Do not become excited. Do not say, now it is working. That will bring the analytical mind back to the surface. Simply continue. Let the relief deepen. Let the phrase become softer and less frequent. Let the scene do less and the feeling do more. There may come a moment when the words fade, and only a mood remains, a quiet sense that all is well, that nothing needs to be handled now, that the matter is settled somewhere deeper than reason. If that mood comes, honor it. Do not drag yourself back into words because you think you must keep repeating them. The purpose of the phrase is to lead you into the state. Once in the state, rest there. The silent feeling of completion is the true acceptance. And if no scene seems to come easily tonight, do not be troubled. Use only the phrase and the feeling of physical surrender. That alone can be enough. Lie there and with each exhalation feel yourself releasing the burden downward, as though placing it into the hands of the deepest part of your being. Leave it in God's hands. It is done. Then breathe. It is in God's hands now. Then breathe. The law is not limited to one method. What matters is that you cease mental effort and assume the peace of fulfillment. If sleep comes quickly and you feel you barely practiced, do not worry. The drowsy edge itself is powerful. A few sincere moments at the threshold are often more fruitful than long-strained effort, while fully awake. Remember, we are not trying to stay awake and control the process. We are using the approach of sleep as the door through which we impress the deeper self. If you fall asleep in the spirit of surrender, the work is done. Should you wake in the night with worry, use the same pattern. Do not sit up and begin the old story again. Stay still if you can. Feel the bed. Slow the breath. Relax the chest. Return to the phrase, it is in God's hands now. It is done. Let the words be few. Let the tone be calm. Do not turn a night waking into a tribunal. Turn it into another planting. And in the morning, when you first stir, but before the day rushes in, catch one small moment and renew the state, not with effort, but with remembrance. Feel the body waking, before thought gathers force. Whisper inwardly, thank you. It is done. Then rise as one who planted well. You need not look for proof at once. You need not inspect the world to see whether the seed has sprouted. Your task is not to dig. Your task is to carry the fragrance of the night's surrender into the day. As you practice this night after night, you will discover that the true gift is not only the outer manifestation, though that will come in its appointed way. The immediate gift is the restoration of your own being. Sleep becomes holy again. Bed becomes not a place of wrestling, but a sanctuary. The body learns safety. The mind learns trust. The heart learns Sabbath. And from that Sabbath, the world is quietly reshaped. So tonight, go slowly. Breathe, relax. Enter the small final scene. Speak the phrase gently. Repeat it only as needed. No struggle, no analysis, no forcing, no measuring. Let yourself be carried across the threshold. Let sleep receive you while the feeling of completion remains. And if all you can do is soften one breath more than yesterday, that too is a victory, for you are learning the art of leaving it in God's hands. There are some who imagine that this law belongs only to grand visions, to healings, to extraordinary events, to things so dramatic that one cannot miss the hand of God in them. But I tell you, it is often seen most clearly in the quiet affairs of daily life, in the ordinary burdens that men carry in silence, a rent due, a debt owed, a letter expected, a position uncertain, a household need pressing upon the mind. It is there, in these common pressures, that the art of release and assumption proves itself with beautiful precision. And because many who listen tonight carry such burdens, let me speak plainly through simple stories, such as any man or woman of my day might know. I remember a man who came to me with a stack of unpaid notices folded and refolded in his coat pocket until the paper had grown soft at the corners. He did not come from wealth, he worked steadily, but the wages were narrow and the demands upon him many. Rent, provisions, old obligations, a small loan taken in haste months earlier, all pressing at once. He spoke as men speak when they have been thinking too long in circles. He told the story from every angle. This one was due on Tuesday. That one had already been delayed. The landlord had become stern. He had written to a relative and received no answer. He had counted and recounted the coins in a drawer until even the counting seemed to mock him. I listened, and then I asked him a simple question. When you lie down at night, do you continue paying these bills in your mind? He looked at me with surprise and said, "Yes, of course. How can I not?" I said, "Then you are paying twice, once in imagination with fear, and once in the world with delay. Tonight you must stop paying inwardly." He thought I was speaking in metaphor, but I meant it literally. I told him that before sleep he must lay down the whole burden and assume one short scene only. His landlord standing at the door with an entirely different expression, not stern but cordial, saying, "All is settled. We are perfectly in order." I told him to hear those words, feel the relief in his chest, and let sleep take him there. He returned some days later and told me what happened. The outer event did not come in the way his anxious mind would have planned. His landlord did not suddenly vanish, nor did gold fall from heaven. Instead, a bridge of incidents formed. A man who had once hired him for seasonal work called unexpectedly, needing help for a short but urgent task. The pay was immediate. Then, on the same morning, a small amount long owed to him by an acquaintance was brought, not because he demanded it, but because, as the man put it, he had thought of it suddenly, and felt he ought to settle it. None of this seemed miraculous to the world. Yet when he stood before the landlord and paid, the landlord did in fact say, almost word for word, "Now then, all is settled." The law had unfolded through the most natural channel, but its origin was in the man's release of mental effort and his assumption of the end. There was a woman who lived in rented rooms and feared each month's collection day as one fears the approach of a storm. Not because her landlady was cruel, but because the woman herself had made a secret ritual of dread. Days before payment was due, she would begin inwardly rehearsing embarrassment. She imagined explanations. She imagined delay. She imagined the look on the landlady's face. By the time the actual knock came, she had lived the scene in anxiety a dozen times. I told her, "You are giving your imagination to the very thing you do not want. Change the scene before the knock arrives." She asked me what scene to choose, and I said, "Something simple. Hear the knock. Rise in imagination calmly. Open the door. See your landlady smiling. Not as collector, but almost as a friend, and hear her say something kind and ordinary. Let the whole thing feel easy. She protested that this was foolish, for the rent was real and due. I agreed that to the senses it was real, but I reminded her that the state from which she met it was just as real, and was the true cause of what followed. I told her not to deny the payment, but to deny the state of pressure. She practiced for several nights. She did not do it perfectly. She told me later, her mind wandered and fear returned again and again. But each time she came back to the same imaginal act: the knock, the door, the gentle face, the kind tone. Within a fortnight, the landlady informed the tenants that she was leaving town for some weeks to care for a sister, and would collect all rent thereafter on a different arrangement through her nephew. That alone relieved the woman's nervous anticipation. More than that, the nephew, unlike the landlady, was employed at a small office where a vacancy soon opened for clerical help. He mentioned it in passing when he came to collect. The woman applied, was accepted, and the steady additional income resolved the very pressure that had tormented her. Again, notice the bridge. She did not force the world. She released the state of dread, assumed ease, and life built the path. I knew another man who was troubled not by rent, but by a note due to a merchant. In my day, men bought on account, and when one's account fell behind, the embarrassment was often worse than the sum itself. This man had ceased entering the merchant street entirely, taking longer routes through the city to avoid being seen. Think of what that means. His whole body had accepted the state of debtor. His steps were shaped by fear. His route through town was the map of his assumption. I told him, "You have already been acting from the end. But it is the wrong end. You are walking as the man condemned. Begin walking as the man restored." He said he did not know how to do that, while the balance remained. So I gave him a practical, imaginal act. I asked him to imagine entering the merchant's shop in broad daylight, not sneaking past it, but walking in as any welcome customer would. I asked him to hear ordinary conversation, to feel no shrinking in the body, to imagine the merchant saying with warmth, "Good to see you again." That was all. Not a dramatic settlement, not a miraculous declaration, only the restoration of dignity in the scene. I told him to repeat that in the drowsy state, and to let the feeling of social ease replace the inner cringe of debt. What followed was a perfect example of destiny moving through natural channels. A position opened in a warehouse where he had once worked years before. He had not sought it. A former overseer sent word through a mutual acquaintance that they needed a reliable man. The wages were better than his present arrangement, and there was opportunity for extra loading work at certain times of month. He took it, and within a short season, the account was paid. But what moved me most was not the payment itself. It was what he said after. "Neville, I walked into that shop before the money came, and I found I was no longer ashamed." You see, the outer payment followed, but the real transformation began when he stopped wearing inwardly the garments of humiliation. There was also a widow who feared letters, not the friendly kind, but the official hand, the folded paper bearing demands, reminders, final notices, each one landing like a stone in the house. She had come to associate the Morning Post with dread, so that the mere sound of footsteps at the gate tightened her breathing. I have known many such people, and I tell you this because those who listen while drifting into sleep often carry precisely this strain. They are not merely burdened by circumstance, but by the anticipation of circumstance. They suffer tomorrow repeatedly before tomorrow arrives. I told her to revise the meaning of the post itself. Do not begin, I said, with the sum or the settlement. Begin with the sound. She looked puzzled, but I continued. When you hear the post delivered, let that sound mean good news. Change the association. Hear the letters drop and feel gratitude before opening anything. Then imagine unfolding a letter and reading language of relief. She asked what language, and I suggested something plain, something a clerk might actually write. An error in the account has been corrected, or this matter has been adjusted, or simply no action is required at this time. I asked her to choose one and make it real in feeling. She chose the phrase, "This matter has been adjusted." Night after night, she heard it inwardly. She told me she would hold the imagined paper in her hands and move her thumb over the fold to make it seem real. She did not know how anything could be adjusted, but she practiced the end. In time there came a sequence of events, which any reasonable man would call ordinary and yet which, arranged together, made the whole thing almost lyrical. A clerical mistake was discovered in one account. A duplicate charge, months old, was removed. A small pension matter, long delayed, was finally processed after papers, previously misplaced, were found. A cousin, learning by letter of her circumstances, sent temporary help. The remarkable thing was not a single dramatic rescue, but the orchestration. Each item by itself was modest. Together, they altered the condition completely. The bridge of incidents need not be spectacular to be divine. I recall a young man uncertain of work, not yet established, moving from one temporary engagement to another, carrying in his pocket more worry than money. He was not in debt in the strict sense, but he lived in the state of impending lack, which amounts to the same bondage. He was always speaking of if only, and until something turns up. His imagination was fixed upon the gap, never upon the end. He desired steady work, dignified work, but spent his evenings imagining rejection, imagining closed doors, imagining the look of disinterest on the faces of men to whom he would present himself. I told him to abandon the effort of trying to force opportunities and instead to assume the feeling of already being wanted, not needed as a laboring body only, but welcomed, expected, valued. I asked him to create a short imaginal scene in which he sat at a table in modest lodgings, writing a letter home, saying, "The position is mine, and I begin Monday." I wanted him to feel the calm certainty of writing that sentence, the steadiness of the hand, the ease in the chest, not excitement, not wild triumph, but the settled feeling of a thing arranged. He practiced the scene, and with the scene came a change in carriage. He no longer entered rooms with the posture of one pleading for chance. He entered as one who expected to be placed. A friend noticed the change and mentioned him to a bookseller who needed a dependable assistant. It was not the trade the young man had previously sought, and therein lies another lesson. The bridge often comes by an unexpected road. Yet the position proved suitable, the pay regular, and from that point other opportunities grew. When he later spoke of the event, he said, "It seemed as though life met me halfway once I stopped chasing it from fear." I said, "Life always does. It was your state that changed first." There was an older couple, very modest in means, living under the strain of rising household expenses. Nothing dramatic, no scandalous debt, no single catastrophe, only the grinding pressure of many small necessities. Coal, food, repairs, clothing, medicine. Such pressures can be more exhausting than one large event, because they return daily. The husband had taken to muttering over every expense. The wife, though devout in her way, had begun to speak as though lack were a permanent tenant in the house. Their home had become inwardly a place of accounting, never of rest. I did not begin by speaking to them of money. I spoke of atmosphere. I told them you must change the feeling of the house, for in truth, their dwelling had become an imaginal workshop of anxiety. They asked what to do, and I suggested the simplest practice. Each evening before sleep, they were to sit quietly for a few moments and imagine their own table after supper, cleared and peaceful, with both of them feeling relieved and saying together, "We are cared for." That was all. No long petition, no complaint, no recitation of bills, just the image of home as a place under grace, not under pressure. At first they felt foolish, the husband especially, but they persisted. The wife later said the true change came when she stopped speaking of every coin as though it were a farewell and began blessing what came and what went alike. In the weeks that followed, Practical changes appeared. A relative offered regular purchase of goods the husband made occasionally by hand, turning a skill once used only sporadically into steady supplemental income. A neighbor shared information about cheaper coal delivery through a cooperative arrangement. An old dispute over a small amount was resolved in their favor. None of this would impress the sensational mind. Yet in lived experience, it was transformation. Their house felt different before their accounts did, and then the accounts followed. The peace was the sign. The outer changes were the echo. I remember a clerk who dreaded receipts and account books because he had once made an error that led to severe correction from his employer. From that day on, every time he handled figures, he did so with fear. He did not trust his own mind. And because he assumed confusion, confusion followed him. This is another kind of debt. Not only money owed, but confidence lost. He came to me saying he feared dismissal and could not sleep before inventory days. I told him that what he truly needed to release was not the account, but the self-concept of the man who always errs. I asked him to imagine a very small scene. His employer handing him a ledger and saying, "Well done, you are exact, as always." He laughed at the phrase "as always," for he felt the opposite was true. I said, "That is precisely why you must hear it." He was to feel the quiet pride of competence, the settled nerves, the steady hand. At night he repeated this scene, and in the daytime he practiced not rushing. He would pause, breathe, and refuse the inward phrase, "I shall make a mistake." Instead he would say softly, "I am clear, I am exact." Soon he discovered that the body itself had been his instrument of error. Fear had hurried his hand and scattered his attention. As the state changed, his accuracy improved naturally. In time, his employer did in fact commend him, though not in the exact words imagined. Yet the essence was fulfilled. He was given greater responsibility, which brought greater pay. Again, the bridge was natural. He did not magically escape all arithmetic. He changed the state from which he approached it, and the world mirrored that change in performance, reputation, and income. There was also a seamstress I knew, who lived from commissions and often in uncertainty, waiting for orders, fearing the gaps between them. Such workers know a peculiar anxiety, not the burden of one large debt, but the absence of visible continuity. One week is full, the next is empty, and the mind begins to worship the full week and fear the empty one. She had developed the habit of counting future lack in advance. If she finished 3 garments, she did not feel gratitude for the work completed. She immediately feared the next order not yet placed. Thus, she never dwelt in completion, only in interruption. I told her to create an imaginal rhythm corresponding to the life she desired. Not a single dramatic rescue, but continuity. Each night she was to imagine arranging finished garments carefully, hearing a woman's voice say, "I have brought another order for you," and feeling not surprise but normality. That was important. I insisted she not react in the scene as though this were an extraordinary blessing. She was to feel it as the natural pattern of her life. Then she was to fall asleep in that feeling of ongoing provision. The result did not come from one wealthy patron descending like an angel. It came through circulation. One satisfied customer recommended her to another. A household where she had done mending began sending regular work. A local shopkeeper, hearing of her skill, offered to pass along requests for alterations. Gradually, the empty intervals shortened. What changed first was not the market, but her inner relationship to intervals. She no longer greeted pauses with doom. She remained in the assumption of continuation, and continuation formed. Another man, a laborer, had received word that his hours might be reduced. This threatened not only his present comfort, but his ability to meet a small debt he had promised to settle by a certain date. He came in great agitation, wanting advice on whom to speak to, what argument to make, how to secure favor. I told him that while he might do outwardly what was natural, his true work must be inward, because if he went in fear, he would speak from fear and hear from fear. I asked him to imagine instead that the foreman had already assured him, "You will have steady hours. Do not trouble yourself." I wanted him to feel the relief of hearing this from authority. He practiced it in the drowsy state, and importantly, he ceased discussing possible disaster with every man he met. This restraint alone altered him. He later told me that the very reduction he feared did occur in one department, but on the same day, another team required extra hands due to delayed deliveries, and he was transferred there with steady work maintained. The debt was paid on time. Observe the bridge. The feared appearance was not simply erased, but it became part of the path by which fulfillment came. This is why I tell you not to judge too quickly what appears before the senses. What seems like setback may be rearrangement. A woman once wrote to me about a receipt she had misplaced for a payment already made. The creditor insisted no record had been found, and the amount was demanded again. She searched everywhere in distress. The sum was not enormous, but to pay twice would have injured her household. She spent her days retracing steps, accusing herself, and reliving the moment of payment in panic. I wrote back and told her to stop searching inwardly in fear before she searched outwardly again. I asked her to assume not only that the matter was resolved, but that she herself was orderly and protected. In imagination, she was to see the receipt in her own hand and hear herself say calmly, "Here it is." She practiced this at night, touching an imagined slip of paper between finger and thumb. During the day she looked again, but no longer in frenzy. 2 days later she found the receipt tucked inside a prayer book she had opened while looking for comfort but forgotten she had used the morning of the payment. Now one may say this was merely memory returning. I say exactly so. And what restored the memory? The change of state. Panic obscured what calm revealed. She also told me something beautiful. Even before the receipt was found, she had already begun to feel strangely protected, as though the matter belonged to a larger order than her own striving. That feeling is what I want you to hear tonight. Beneath all these stories, the outer resolution matters, yes, but the inward Sabbath is itself the sign that the law has been touched. There was a tenant farmer who feared a poor season and had already begun to imagine debt before the ground was even fully worked. Such men can become servants of future failure if they are not watchful, because the field itself teaches them sequence and delay, and the mind easily turns that delay into dread. He had obligations for seed and tools, and if the yield disappointed, he would be strained for another year. I did not tell him to ignore the weather or abandon his labor. I told him to labor without inwardly bowing to fear. At night he was to imagine standing in his storehouse with a sense of sufficiency, hearing himself say to his wife, "It has been a good season. We are well provided for." He practiced this while still waking each day to uncertainty in the sky. The season was not without challenge. There were weeks when rain did not come as desired, and others when too much came at once. Yet he held his assumption more steadily than before. He adjusted when needed, took advice where natural, and did not sink into the old state of mental defeat. In the end, though the yield was not perfect in every part of the field, a better market price than expected, and a favorable exchange on part of his crop brought him through not merely safely, but with margin. He told me later, "I learned that I had been exhausted less by the work than by fearing the work before it was done." This is true for many who listen tonight. The burden is often doubled by anticipation. I also remember a young woman seeking a position as governess, carrying letters of introduction and much inward uncertainty. She had been turned away politely several times and had begun to assume that every new household would find her lacking. She came to me not asking for riches, but for placement and dignity. I told her to choose a final scene of quiet belonging, not the interview itself. Interviews are too much middle. I asked her to imagine writing to a dear friend from her new room, describing the household kindly and saying, "They have received me well, and I feel at home here." I wanted the state of being accepted, not the strain of being examined. She entered that scene nightly, and as she told me, began to feel less like a petitioner and more like one being led to her place. Soon she was introduced to a family through a connection that had not previously seemed promising. The interview was simple, almost unremarkable, and that was the beauty of it. She was not performing desperation. She was inhabiting acceptance. She received the position and later wrote me from that very room, saying nearly the words she had imagined. A letter fulfilled a letter. An imaginal correspondence became an actual one. Such things are not coincidences to those who know the law. Let me give you one more, because it shows how destiny itself may appear to change course through the simplest assumption. A man was convinced he had missed his chance in life, not merely money, but a whole direction. He had declined an opportunity years earlier, and from then on he narrated his life as the story of the man who came too late. Many people are in debt to the past in this way. They owe allegiance to an old decision and keep paying interest in regret. Naturally, his outer affairs reflected this state. He took work beneath his confidence, delayed action, expected little, and called it realism. I told him that before any outer opportunity could be recognized, he must release his loyalty to the identity of the late man. I asked him to construct a scene, implying not that he had gone backward and corrected the past, but that life had come again in generosity. He chose to imagine meeting an old acquaintance who would say, "You are in exactly the right place now. It has worked out better than before." I instructed him to hear those words as truth and to fall asleep in the feeling of right timing, not lost timing. Some months later, through a chain of events involving temporary work, a recommendation, and a sudden vacancy created by another man's departure, he entered a field related to the very path he thought forever lost. But more than that, he entered it with maturity and steadiness he had not possessed years earlier. When he told me the story, he said with tears in his eyes, "It seems I was not late at all. I was being brought by another road. That is destiny corrected by imagination. Not by violence, not by force, but by release and assumption." So when you hear these stories of letters, receipts, rents, accounts, wages, rooms, work, and obligations, do not reduce them to little moral tales. Hear the law beneath them. In every case, the same pattern reveals itself. First, the man or woman grips inwardly, rehearses, fears, calculates, and thereby gives life to the burden. Then comes the turning, the surrender of mental effort, the acceptance of a different state, the assumption of the end. Then follows the bridge of incidents, natural, often modest, sometimes surprising, but always precise in its own way. And finally comes the visible echo, the thing arranged, the matter adjusted, the debt settled, the position found, the burden lifted. This is why I say, you need not know the means. In my day, it may come through letters and ledgers, through landlords and merchants, through employers and neighbors, through a misplaced receipt found, through a delayed payment arriving, through a recommendation carried by word of mouth. In another age, the clothing of events may differ, but the law itself is unchanged. The outer channels are many. The inward act is one. Release the burden, assume the end, rest in the feeling that it is already in God's hands. Then let life reveal the bridge. And if tonight you carry some matter of debt, money, work, or destiny that seems woven tightly around you, do not be impressed by its complexity. Men are overwhelmed, not because the law fails, but because they measure the knot and forget the hand that unties it. Your task is not to pull every thread while lying in bed. Your task is to enter the Sabbath, hear the kind word, feel the receipt in your hand, sense the landlord's softened tone, write the letter saying, "It is settled." Open the imaginary envelope and read, "This matter has been adjusted." Let the body know relief before the world displays the reason for it. For the bridge will come. It may come by one event or many. It may pass through what first looks like delay. It may arrive by someone remembering you, by a correction made, by an overlooked chance, by a door you once ignored, now opening naturally. Do not dictate the route. Leave that in God's hands. Your part is the inward acceptance that the matter is finished. Then, like all these men and women, you will one day look back upon the chain of events and say, not with superstition but with understanding, it unfolded exactly as it had to, once I ceased struggling and assumed the end. There is another burden that keeps many men and women from entering rest, and it is often heavier than the bill in the drawer or the letter on the table. It is the past, not the past as a calendar records it, but the past as feeling preserves it, a scene of humiliation, a harsh conversation, a refusal, a mistake, a moment in which you felt small, exposed, foolish, or afraid. Though the event itself has passed, many continue to pay it inwardly every day. They replay it, defend themselves against it, argue with it, and bow to it as though it still possessed authority. And then they wonder why the same conditions keep returning in new clothing. I tell you, you are not bound to the past except by your agreement with its meaning. What you remember is not merely what happened. What you remember is the state in which you keep revisiting what happened. This is why I have spoken so often of revision. Revision is not denial. It is not pretending that the outer event never occurred in the world of facts. It is the redeeming use of imagination. It is the deliberate rewriting of the inner experience so that the state attached to that memory is changed. And when the state changes, the future that would have grown from it changes also. Many do not understand this and say, but Neville, the thing happened. The words were spoken. The loss was real. The shame was real. Yes, to the senses, it was real. And while it was being lived, it felt final. But your world is not sustained by events. It is sustained by consciousness. The event is a shadow cast by a state. And if the state is altered, the shadow no longer has the same creative power. The past in imagination is not dead. It is alive so long as you keep feeding it, feeling. Therefore, revise not to escape responsibility, but to withdraw life from the old assumption and give life to the new. I have seen men haunted for years by one moment of financial shame, a missed payment, a public demand, a creditor speaking sharply in front of others. The outer account was long settled, and yet inwardly they remained debtors because the memory had become identity. Each new opportunity was met through that old wound. They would approach work expecting reproach. They would handle money expecting loss. They would hear neutral tones as criticism because the old scene still governed them. In such cases, I do not begin by telling them to imagine wealth. I begin by telling them to redeem the scene that made them feel unworthy of wealth. Take, for example, a man who once stood before a landlord and could not pay. The landlord was impatient, the words were hard, and the man felt in that instant stripped of dignity. He carried that moment like a brand. Years later, though his circumstances had changed somewhat, he still became inwardly small whenever money was mentioned. He would over-explain, apologize before being accused, and shrink from simple obligations as though each one were another trial. I told him, "You are still standing in that doorway. Leave it." He looked at me as though I was speaking madness, but I meant it literally in imagination. I asked him to return to that scene nightly, but not to relive it as victim. He was to rewrite it. In revision, the same doorway, the same landlord, the same setting if he wished, but a different emotional reality. He was to hear the landlord speak with unexpected courtesy. He was to hear, "Take your time, it is all right. I know your character," or any phrase that restored dignity. More importantly, he was to feel himself standing upright, breathing easily, no shame in the chest, no collapse in the throat. I told him not to force tears or drama, but to repeat the revised scene until his body no longer answered the memory with humiliation. After some weeks, he reported something remarkable. He said the old incident no longer struck him in the same way. He could remember the facts, but the sting had dissolved, and as that changed, his present dealings changed. He negotiated calmly. He stopped apologizing for existing. He accepted a better position, offered by a man he had previously avoided out of fear of being found out as inadequate. You see, the revision did not merely comfort him, it altered the state from which he lived, and life mirrored the new state. This is why I say forgiveness is not chiefly a moral gesture toward another person. It is the cleansing of state. If you carry resentment, whether against others or yourself, you remain bound to the state in which the injury is alive. To forgive is not to approve what was done. It is to cease using imagination to perpetuate the wound. It is to release your identity from the scene. It is to say, I no longer live there. I no longer draw my concept of self from that moment. In that sense, forgiveness is one of the highest forms of wisdom because it frees the imagination for creation rather than repetition. There are listeners tonight who are not tormented by a creditor but by their own memory of failing. Perhaps you lost a position and concluded, I am unreliable. Perhaps a business attempt ended badly and you accepted, I am not meant to prosper. Perhaps you trusted someone and were deceived, and from that moment you began to live as one who must always guard, always suspect, always control. See what has happened. The event ended, but the assumption remained, and it is the assumption that continues to ask for payment. You are not paying men now. You are paying old conclusions about yourself. And I say to you gently, stop paying them. When I tell you, you are not paying to men, you are paying to old assumptions. I mean this exactly. The pressure you feel in the present often belongs less to the present bill than to the ancient state through which you interpret it. Two men can receive the same notice. One feels momentary concern and acts. The other feels shame, doom, self-accusation, and panic. Why the difference? Not the paper, the state. The second man is paying interest on memories. The old assumption says, this always ends badly. I am trapped. I am the one to whom relief comes late. And because he believes it, he keeps renewing the debt inwardly. Revision is the mercy by which imagination stops, renewing the old account. Let me show you how I would have you use it in the quiet, before sleep. Do not begin with 10 scenes. Choose one. The one that still tightens the body when remembered. The one that has become a secret shrine of pain. Perhaps it is a conversation where you were dismissed. Perhaps a moment when you were told there was not enough. Perhaps a time you felt embarrassed by your own condition. Do not fear the memory. You are not entering it to suffer again, but to redeem it. Enter as the operant power. Enter as the one who now knows the law. See the place if you can. Hear the voices. But then, gently alter the ending. Let the tone change. Let the words spoken to you become kind, respectful, reassuring. If the scene involved your own mistake, revise your response. See yourself composed, clear, dignified. Hear yourself speak wisely. If no other person is needed, then revise the feeling alone. Where there was tightening, feel release. Where there was heat of shame, feel cool, calm. Where there was dread, feel relief. Repeat the revised version until it begins to feel natural, not forced. Then let sleep take that revised scene into the deeper mind. Some ask, must the revised scene be exactly what would have happened in life? Not at all. It need only imply the state you wish had been true, and wish now to make true. The subconscious does not ask for historical accuracy. It accepts impression. If a simple phrase spoken in imagination restores you, use that phrase. It is all right. You are forgiven. You did well. This is settled. You are safe. Let it be plain and warm and believable to your heart. The object is not theatrical perfection. The object is cleansing the state. There was a woman who carried shame from a single incident in which she had asked for help from a relative and been refused coldly. The refusal itself was one thing, but what she accepted inwardly was far worse. She concluded, I am a burden. I am the one no one wants to help. From that day she entered every relationship defensively. She offered too much, asked for nothing, and silently resented others for not reading her needs. Her outer life reflected this assumption repeatedly. She was not only lacking support, she was identifying with being unsupported. I told her to revise that scene each night, not by making the relative shower her with riches, but by hearing one sentence spoken with warmth. Of course, you need not carry this alone. I asked her to feel the shock of being met with kindness, and then the deeper feeling beneath the shock, the simple truth of being worthy of care. She did this faithfully. In time, she said the memory lost its poison. The relative had not changed, but she had. Soon she found herself receiving help from entirely different quarters, and because her state had changed, she could receive it without humiliation. The world did not owe her a replay with the same person. It owed her the echo of the new assumption, and it gave it. Forgiveness of self is especially important here, for many are harsher judges of themselves than any creditor has ever been. They revisit old errors and pronounce sentence anew each day. I should have known. I ruined everything. I always make the wrong choice. Such phrases are not reflections. They are decrees. If you continue to speak them inwardly, you command their continuation. To forgive yourself is to withdraw the title of permanent identity from a temporary state. You were in error, perhaps. Yes, you were afraid, perhaps. Yes, but you are not error itself. You are not fear itself. You are the awareness that can assume a new state. When you revise, do not revise from self-condemnation. Do not use revision as another way of saying, I must fix myself because I was so foolish. That is still the old state. Revise from tenderness. Revise as one washing a wound, not punishing a child. The imagination responds beautifully to gentleness. If you approach the past with violence, you often re-impress the very feeling you wish to remove. But if you approach it with mercy, saying inwardly, let me redeem this, the old knot begins to loosen. And here is a subtle but vital point. Revision and forgiveness are not separate acts. True revision is forgiveness in imaginal form, and true forgiveness is revision in feeling. When you revise a scene of shame until it no longer defines you, you have forgiven. When you forgive someone and release the emotional charge of what occurred, you have revised the meaning of that event in consciousness. In both cases, you have cleaned the state. You have ceased paying yesterday with today's life. I would have those who listen, while drifting towards sleep, take this to heart, because night is the perfect hour for such cleansing. The body grows quiet. The rigid logic of the day softens. The mind becomes more pliable, more willing to receive a new impression. This is why so many carry the past into tomorrow without knowing it. They fall asleep replaying old injuries, and the subconscious, faithful servant that it is, receives them as instructions. Then tomorrow arrives, clothed in the same emotional pattern, and they call it fate. But tonight you may choose otherwise. Tonight you may revise before sleep and let the deeper mind incubate mercy instead of memory. If there is someone you cannot yet forgive, begin not with grand declarations, but with release of the scene. You need not force affection. You need not say what your heart cannot yet say honestly. Start more simply. See the scene and remove its venom. Hear different words, or hear no words at all, and only feel yourself free. Sometimes the first forgiveness is not toward the other, but toward your own nervous system. Your body has been bracing for a memory as though it were present. Let it unclench. Let the shoulders drop. Let the jaw soften. Let the chest receive the truth. This is no longer happening now. Even that is cleansing. As the state is cleaned, your present life becomes easier to surrender into God's hands, because you are no longer gripping from old pain. Many think they cannot let go of control because the present problem is so large. Often the present problem is not the true cause. It is only touching an old bruise. Heal the bruise in imagination, and the hand that clutched so tightly begins to open by itself. Then surrender. No longer feels like danger. It feels like home. I remember a man who was financially stable by all appearances, and yet could not rest. He checked and rechecked every arrangement, expected betrayal in every agreement, and slept poorly despite outward sufficiency. In conversation, it emerged that years earlier, he had been deceived by a business partner, and had nearly lost everything. Though the visible crisis had passed, inwardly he remained in the state of the betrayed man. He had mistaken vigilance for wisdom and anxiety for responsibility. I told him, You are trying to control tomorrow, because you are still arguing with yesterday. I asked him to revise the decisive scene in which he learned of the betrayal. In his revision, he was not naive. He did not imagine becoming blind to facts. He imagined instead receiving the information with composure and hearing within himself, I am protected. This will turn to my good. He repeated this until the old memory no longer sent a shock through his body. Gradually, he found he could act with clarity without the old panic. His decisions improved. His dealings became cleaner. The law, once obstructed by fear, moved more freely through him. In his own words, I stopped living as though life were always trying to catch me unprepared. That is forgiveness as liberation of state. So tonight, if you would truly leave things in God's hands, do not only speak the phrase for the future. Clean the inner chamber of the past. Revise the shame. Revise the fear. Revise the moment you concluded against yourself. Forgive the one who wounded you by refusing to make that wound your identity. Forgive yourself by refusing to call an old state your true name. Let imagination wash the memory until only wisdom remains. Then, when you say, I leave it in God's hands, you will not be saying it with hidden trembling. You will be saying it from a cleansed state, and a cleansed state receives easily. For what is forgiveness if not this, the refusal to keep paying a debt that imagination can dissolve? What is revision if not this, the restoration of your right to occupy a new state now? The world may tell you the past is fixed. I tell you the past as fact may be recorded, but the past as living cause can be changed tonight. And when the cause is changed, the future born from it is changed also. So do not go to sleep as the one who was humiliated, abandoned, refused, delayed, or afraid. Do not take that old name into the sacred threshold. Revise it, bless it, clean it. Say inwardly, with tenderness and authority, that was an old assumption. I release it now. And as you do, you will feel a strange lightness, as though some hidden account has quietly been balanced. That is because it has. You were never paying to men. You were paying to old assumptions. And tonight, by revision and forgiveness, you may close that account forever. Now, beloved, let everything become simpler. You have listened long enough. You have understood enough. You do not need to hold the teaching in your mind like a weight. You do not need to remember every word. The seed does not ask the farmer to stay awake and watch it. The seed only asks to be planted. So let your mind soften now. Let the day loosen its grip. Let your thoughts slow down, as though they are drifting on quiet water. If the eyes are open, let them grow heavy. If they are closed, let them rest in darkness. And if you are still awake, that is perfectly all right. There is nothing you must force. There is nothing you must prove. There is only one gentle movement now, and it is inward. Let your shoulders drop. Let the forehead smooth. Let the tongue rest. Let the breath become easy and unhurried. In and out, as though you are being breathed rather than trying to breathe. And as you breathe, remember the simplest truth I can give you tonight. The world does not need your strain. It only needs your state. You do not change life by wrestling it. You change life by assuming the end and resting there. So I speak to you as I would speak to one I love, quietly, steadily, without hurry. Hear these words as a warm hand upon the heart. You are safe, you are held, you are guided, you are protected. Everything that concerns you is already arranged. Everything that has troubled you is already answered. Everything that has felt heavy is already lifting. Now do not argue with these words. Do not examine them. Simply let them be true for one breath. One breath is enough to open the door. You are safe. You are held. You are guided. And you do not need to carry what God carries. You do not need to lift what the unseen power lifts. You do not need to manage what infinite wisdom manages. You only need to surrender the burden and take the peace. So softly, inwardly, let the old gripping release. Let the hands unclench. Let the chest open. Let the stomach soften. Let the back rest. Let the jaw loosen. Let the entire body receive the message that there is nothing to fight right now. Nothing to fight, nothing to chase, nothing to fix. It is done. It is done. Not because you have seen it, but because you have assumed it. Not because the senses agree, but because consciousness is the cause. It is done. And as you let those words settle, you may feel a gentle quiet spreading through you, like warm water. This quiet is not emptiness. This quiet is faith. This quiet is the Sabbath. This quiet is the proof. So if any thought arises, any small worry, any memory, do not wrestle it. Do not push it away. Simply bless it and let it pass and return to the single mood of completion. I have already placed it in God's hands. I have already released it. I have already assumed the end. It is done. And when you say God, do not imagine a distant being. Think of the depth of your own awareness. Think of the I am that hears without ears, that sees without eyes, that acts without effort. That I am is the one holding you now. You are not alone in this night. You are not alone in your life. You are not alone in your unfolding. The unseen is with you. The unseen is within you. And the unseen is working in perfect order. So let yourself be carried. Let yourself be led. Let yourself be loved by life itself. And if the mind wants to ask, how will it happen? Answer with kindness. That is not my work. If the mind wants to ask, when will it change? Answer with calm. That is not my burden. If the mind wants to say, but I must do something, answer gently. I have already done the only thing that matters. I have assumed, and in that assumption, I rest. In that assumption, I sleep. In that assumption, I am free. So now, hear it again, slowly, warmly, as though it is being spoken from the deepest part of you to the surface of you. All is well. All is well. All is moving in divine order. Everything is unfolding perfectly. The right events are already in motion. The right people are already in motion. The right opportunities are already in motion. The bridge is already forming. You need not see it, you only need to rest. And now I will give you phrases you may allow to repeat softly in you, like a lullaby that rocks you into peace. Do not repeat them with effort. Let them repeat themselves, like the sea repeating its own quiet wave. I am safe. I am protected. I am provided for. I am guided. I am at peace. I am at ease. I am already where I need to be. It is done. It is done. And you may notice, as these phrases move through you, your breathing becomes deeper without you trying. The body understands peace better than the mind. The body recognizes truth by relaxation. The body knows when the burden is gone, so let the body teach you now. Let the breath slow. Let the limbs grow heavy. Let the bed hold you. Let the darkness be gentle. Let the night be kind. Let the world outside the room fade into distance. You are here, and here is enough. And if you are listening while you drift, then drift without apology. Drift without fear. Drift without trying to stay awake. You need not be alert. You need not be strong. You need not be anything but willing to be soothed by the feeling of completion. So again, quietly, I have placed it in God's hands. I have placed it in God's hands. And God's hands are sure. God's hands are steady. God's hands do not tremble. God's hands do not hurry. God's hands do not fail. It is done. And you may let your mind picture, if you wish, the simplest image. Not a drama. Not a great scene. Only the end implied. Perhaps a small table. And upon it a letter, and on the letter the words that mean completion. Or perhaps a friend's voice saying, "It worked out." Or perhaps simply the feeling of waking in the morning with a quiet heart, with no dread, with no pressure, with ease. If the image comes, let it come. If it does not come, do not seek it. The feeling is enough. The feeling is the seed. The feeling is the prayer. So rest in the feeling. Rest in the feeling that it is settled. Rest in the feeling that it is arranged. Rest in the feeling that you are carried. Now if any last tension remains, breathe into it and let it melt. A slow breath in and a slower breath out, as though you are releasing the final thread of control. You do not need it tonight. You do not need it ever again. Control is heavy. Trust is light. And you were made for lightness. You were made for peace. You were made for fulfillment. So again, in the softest way, all is well. All is well. All is well. It is done. It is done. It is done. And as these words repeat, you may stop listening actively and begin to simply receive. Let the sound wash over you. Let the meaning sink beneath thought. Let it settle into the deeper mind, the one that builds without effort, the one that creates while you sleep. Because that is the great mercy of this law. You do not have to strain. You do not have to watch. You do not have to force. You sleep, and the seed grows. You rest, and the bridge forms. You surrender, and the world rearranges. So now, let the night take you. Let your breathing be your prayer. Let your ease be your command. Let your quiet be your faith. And if you wake for a moment later, do not panic. Do not struggle. Simply return to the lullaby with one phrase, like returning to a familiar home. I am safe. I am held. It is done. I have left it in God's hands. And God's hands never drop what you place there. Never. So sleep, beloved. Sleep in peace. Sleep in assurance. Sleep in protection. Sleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Sleep knowing the work is finished. It is done. Now, beloved, let everything become simpler. You have listened long enough. You have understood enough. You do not need to hold the teaching in your mind like a weight. You do not need to remember every word. The seed does not ask the farmer to stay awake and watch it. The seed only asks to be planted. So let your mind soften now. Let the day loosen its grip. Let your thoughts slow down, as though they are drifting on quiet water. If the eyes are open, let them grow heavy. If they are closed, let them rest in darkness. And if you are still awake, that is perfectly all right. There is nothing you must force. There is nothing you must prove. There is only one gentle movement now, and it is inward. Let your shoulders drop. Let the forehead smooth. Let the tongue rest. Let the breath become easy and unhurried. In and out, as though you are being breathed, rather than trying to breathe. And as you breathe, remember the simplest truth I can give you tonight. The world does not need your strain. It only needs your state. You do not change life by wrestling it. You change life by assuming the end and resting there. So I speak to you as I would speak to one I love, quietly, steadily, without hurry. Hear these words as a warm hand upon the heart. You are safe. You are held. You are guided. You are protected. Everything that concerns you is already arranged. Everything that has troubled you is already answered. Everything that has felt heavy is already lifting. Now do not argue with these words. Do not examine them. Simply let them be true for one breath. One breath is enough to open the door. You are safe. You are held. You are guided. And you do not need to carry what God carries. You do not need to lift what the unseen power lifts. You do not need to manage what infinite wisdom manages. You only need to surrender the burden and take the peace. So softly, inwardly, let the old gripping release. Let the hands unclench. Let the chest open. Let the stomach soften. Let the back rest. Let the jaw loosen. Let the entire body receive the message that there is nothing to fight right now. Nothing to fight. Nothing to chase. Nothing to fix. It is done. It is done. Not because you have seen it, but because you have assumed it. Not because the senses agree, but because consciousness is the cause. It is done. And as you let those words settle, you may feel a gentle quiet spreading through you, like warm water. This quiet is not emptiness. This quiet is faith. This quiet is the Sabbath. This quiet is the proof. So if any thought arises, any small worry, any memory, do not wrestle it. Do not push it away. Simply bless it and let it pass, and return to the single mood of completion. I have already placed it in God's hands. I have already released it. I have already assumed the end. It is done. And when you say, God, do not imagine a distant being. Think of the depth of your own awareness. Think of the I am that hears without ears, that sees without eyes, that acts without effort. That I am is the one holding you now. You are not alone in this night. You are not alone in your life. You are not alone in your unfolding. The unseen is with you. The unseen is within you. And the unseen is working in perfect order. So let yourself be carried. Let yourself be led. Let yourself be loved by life itself. And if the mind wants to ask, how will it happen? Answer with kindness. That is not my work. If the mind wants to ask, when will it change? Answer with calm. That is not my burden. If the mind wants to say, but I must do something, answer gently. I have already done the only thing that matters. I have assumed, and in that assumption, I rest. In that assumption, I sleep. In that assumption, I am free. So now, hear it again, slowly, warmly, as though it is being spoken from the deepest part of you to the surface of you. All is well. All is well. All is moving in divine order. Everything is unfolding perfectly. The right events are already in motion. The right people are already in motion. The right opportunities are already in motion. The bridge is already forming. You need not see it. You only need to rest. And now I will give you phrases you may allow to repeat softly in you, like a lullaby that rocks you into peace. Do not repeat them with effort. Let them repeat themselves, like the sea repeating its own quiet wave. I am safe. I am protected. I am provided for. I am guided. I am at peace. I am at ease. I am already where I need to be. It is done. It is done. And you may notice, as these phrases move through you, your breathing becomes deeper without you trying. The body understands peace better than the mind. The body recognizes truth by relaxation. The body knows when the burden is gone. So let the body teach you now. Let the breath slow. Let the limbs grow heavy. Let the bed hold you. Let the darkness be gentle. Let the night be kind. Let the world outside the room fade into distance. You are here, and here is enough. And if you are listening while you drift, then drift without apology. Drift without fear. Drift without trying to stay awake. You need not be alert. You need not be strong. You need not be anything but willing to be soothed by the feeling of completion. So again, quietly, I have placed it in God's hands. I have placed it in God's hands. And God's hands are sure. God's hands are steady. God's hands do not tremble. God's hands do not hurry. God's hands do not fail. It is done. And you may let your mind picture, if you wish, the simplest image. Not a drama. Not a great scene. Only the end implied. Perhaps a small table, and upon it, a letter. And on the letter, the words that mean completion. Or perhaps a friend's voice saying, it worked out. Or perhaps simply the feeling of waking in the morning with a quiet heart, with no dread, with no pressure, with ease. If the image comes, let it come. If it does not come, do not seek it. The feeling is enough. The feeling is the seed. The feeling is the prayer. So rest in the feeling. Rest in the feeling that it is settled. Rest in the feeling that it is arranged. Rest in the feeling that you are carried. Now, if any last tension remains, breathe into it and let it melt. A slow breath in and a slower breath out, as though you are releasing the final thread of control. You do not need it tonight. You do not need it ever again. Control is heavy. Trust is light. And you were made for lightness. You were made for peace. You were made for fulfillment. So again, in the softest way, all is well. All is well. All is well. It is done. It is done. It is done. And as these words repeat, you may stop listening actively and begin to simply receive. Let the sound wash over you. Let the meaning sink beneath thought. Let it settle into the deeper mind, the one that builds without effort, the one that creates while you sleep. Because that is the great mercy of this law. You do not have to strain. You do not have to watch. You do not have to force. You sleep, and the seed grows. You rest, and the bridge forms. You surrender, and the world rearranges. So now, let the night take you. Let your breathing be your prayer. Let your ease be your command. Let your quiet be your faith. And if you wake for a moment later, do not panic. Do not struggle. Simply return to the lullaby, with one phrase, like returning to a familiar home. I am safe. I am held. It is done. I have left it in God's hands, and God's hands never drop what you place there. Never. So sleep, beloved. Sleep in peace. Sleep in assurance. Sleep in protection. Sleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Sleep knowing the work is finished. It is done.